Well, good morning, everybody. We're going to get started. Thank you for joining us for our 2021 Fire Safety Summit. And we are so excited to have a large group joining us today. We had over 200 people signed up, and I know people are going to drop in and drop out as we're going with this virtual format. I want to thank you for your patience because we had to make the hard decision back in September. Did we do it in person or not? And after lots and lots of consideration, we decided that this was the kind of event that didn't have to happen, but it was great to happen. And so we decided to go with a virtual format. My name is Kelly Ransdell, and I'm the regional director for the South Central part of NFPA. And I am so excited that we are focusing on electrical safety. Unfortunately, when I look at the fire fatalities that have occurred in North Carolina and pretty much nationally, there are many of them that are avoidable, but have been a cause of electrical safety. And with the holiday season coming up and people getting ready to decorate, we certainly have an opportunity to prevent some of these tragedies. So with that, a couple of things for housekeeping. And that is, if you wouldn't mind, there is a roster within the chat, and I see that Bree Dugans is on here, and Bree actually taught us about a real-time roster during COVID, and so we use those all the time to track training hours. And so I just want to give a shout out to her because that's one of the things that will help us. Just because you signed up ahead of time, this gives us the ability to track it in real time and follow along, because many of you will want some training hours out of this training. So we'll have 2 hours this morning. We'll take an extended break over lunch, and then we'll get started again from 1 to 3. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Brian Taylor, and then he'll be introducing Commissioner Causey. And so with that, Brian, thank you for giving a welcome this morning.
Thank you, Kelly, for the opportunity to be part of this event. And thank you to State Farm for their sponsorship, and of course, NFPA and Kelly, everything she does. She's been very successful taking this around the country, and a lot of great reviews. And of course, here today, we have some experts that's going to be able to talk to you about electrical safety. And we're hearing this, not only here locally, but nationally. And there's a lot of unknowns, but we have our in-house experts that's going to be participating on this today. And I'm excited also when we have had these in person to see the different types of diversity we have in these. Been excited to see chief officers in these meetings or these summits, not only prevention folks. And of course, a lot of that has to do with the community risk reduction points, but the key to it is to get them there and network and see what their folks are battling and dealing with, and what's up and coming. Outside of that, I would like to talk a little bit about what's going on in the Office of State Fire Marshal, because the audience that we have, of course, we have officially changed our injury prevention division to community risk reduction to follow our national trend and the work that we're doing on there. And of course, most of you know that Barry Overman is now the division chief over that area. If anybody is watching the state budget, we all hope to have a state budget voted on this week, and hopefully we'll have something in the next couple of weeks. And in that budget, we have $60,000. Our injury prevention area has always been supported by the Governor's Highway Safety, and we now have a budget that will allow us to do more in our fire deaths or fire prevention and community risk reduction. And all that is due to the data that we have collected off the fire investigations or the fire death investigations and reporting module that we have now, where fire departments have to report to us within 48 hours. That data and putting it in the legislature's face to say that, look, these are our problems and this is what we need to do to work toward it. So there's a lot going on, and hopefully that will help us provide tools to you all and as locals in the field to work on prevention education in the future. So it is my honor and privilege now to bring on your commissioner, Insurance Commissioner, State Fire Marshal Mike Causey, to say a few words at this time.
Playing musical chairs. Thank you, Brian. Kelly, thank you for having me. I want to thank everybody at the National Fire Protection Association and all our partners. We've got some pretty sunny weather here in Raleigh today, and it's just an honor for me to serve as your insurance commissioner and state fire marshal in North Carolina. And we just have a great working relationship with all of our fire departments. Some of you may already know this, but we were able again to get Blue Cross and Blue Shield to make a donation to our underserved volunteer fire departments. So over the next few weeks, we'll be distributing $5,000 outright grant checks to the 100 neediest volunteer fire departments in some of our poorest counties in North Carolina. So I know next week's Thanksgiving, we've done a lot about the cooking fires and the turkey fryers and paying attention to fire safety and home safety. So I appreciate everything that you all do in that regard. And if there's anything we can do or I can do here at the Department of Insurance, just give me a call or let Brian know. We're here to help, and we just want to do everything we can from our standpoint to help you do your jobs better. So thank you for having me, Kelly, and look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thank you, Commissioner, and we appreciate you taking time to join us, and Brian also for the update from OSFM. As we said, we try to figure out, is it worthwhile to do this in our state? And it certainly is. And the support of you and your office is such a pivotal part of this and our fire service partners. And we're thrilled that the whole fire service comes together for these events, from the Firefighters Association to the fire and life safety educators, the fire marshals, the fire chiefs, the Firefighters Burn Children's Fund, of course, DOI and the Office of State Fire Marshal. And then we couldn't do these events without our partnership with State Farm. And it's wow. I have my friend Kim Conyers is very bashful, but Kim is the community engagement person, and Kim makes a lot. She's kind of like the puppet master. She makes a lot of things happen, but she doesn't like a lot of camera time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary Beth Burgess, and she's with State Farm Insurance, to tell you a little bit about State Farm's participation. Thank you for joining us, Mary Beth, and thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you, Commissioner Causey, for being with us today. I'm feeling in the presence of greatness. We've got great leadership in this organization, and also, here with the folks that show up when things happen. I've been a State Farm agent for 16 years, and I help families prepare for the what ifs. But the reality is, I have a desk job. I'm inside, and you guys are the ones that are out there when things really happen. You wake up every day, and you go to work because you pledged to protect and serve our communities. I've spoken with some of you that talk about it as a calling, kind of like a ministry. You're called to it, and you've all answered the call to serve. So I want to thank you for your bravery, your dedication, and your continued commitment to keeping all of us safe. I'm sure each of you remember the first fire or major accident that you personally were called to. I remember mine as an agent. The entire home was gone. I'll never forget the smell. The smell stuck with me for days afterward. And I will never forget the face of the woman who lost everything that day. It will stick with me forever. So we've all seen firsthand the significant damage that a fire, loss of life, damage to property. So at State Farm, we're committed to preventing these things from happening. So financial support to fire prevention programs, financial support to our first responders, programs in schools, community education, safety research, even enhancing building codes to try to prevent these things from happening. I do want to give a shout out to my local fire safety team, especially Lee Goodman and Maria Bost. You guys have been amazing to work with over many, many years, and just your commitment to education in our community has been unparalleled. So thank y'all for that. Since 1922, almost 100 years, State Farm has been committed to helping you all protect our neighbors and our neighborhoods. And I'm looking forward to learning alongside you guys today how we can continue to do that even better. So looking forward to a great day together.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Thanks for being a part of this. And we are so thrilled that State Farm is so involved in many aspects of partnership with us at NFPA. Just to kind of build upon that, I want to mention that your Arson Dog Program is amazing and places dogs in agencies. And we have several here in North Carolina. Barry Overman, who's now with the State Fire Marshal's Office, certainly used to have one of those dogs, and we have several other. And then you also participate nationally. You're the only insurance carrier that participates nationally with the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition. And we are trying to move that needle on home fire sprinklers. And we're getting some traction on builder incentives. And then I also wanted to let everybody know that I have the opportunity to work nationally with State Farm on that partnership. And State Farm across the U.S. and 48 states has given almost $700,000 worth of support for fire safety summits, for fire prevention week kits, for Sparky educator kits. And that all started out of the relationships here in North Carolina. And so I am so proud that we were able to take what we were doing right in North Carolina and expand that at NFPA. And so a big thank you. Next year is the 100th anniversary of State Farm. It's also the 100th anniversary of Fire Prevention Week for NFPA. And so we expect big things to happen with us. And I know there are many folks on the call that on the training today that received Sparky educator kits and also Fire Prevention Week kits. And so a big thank you on behalf of all the fire departments and all the people that get resources from State Farm that you represent, Mary Beth, and also Kim, for your generosity, because a lot of the things we do couldn't happen because we decided to go to a virtual format this year. It didn't cost us money to do the summit. So we decided to roll that into Fire Prevention Week kits. And so we were able to provide even more Fire Prevention Week kits across North Carolina because we didn't have the summit in person. But our intention is to have the summit next year in person. We are going to try. Maybe three's the charm. We're going to try to go back to Mooresville in the western part of the state and Jacksonville in the eastern part of the state next year. We decided, like I said, through lots of prayer and discernment of what do we do to be a good steward of the funds we had. And we had to make a decision at a really unstable time in our state, but I think we made the right decision. And so thank y'all for hanging on. Mary Beth, thanks for being here. And we're going to get started. A couple of housekeeping things. If you have questions, please enter them in the chat. And at the end of the presentations, we'll ask those questions verbally to the presenters and help to address that. So type your questions in. Also, I put the agenda in the chat. And there's also a link for you to sign in. So we need you to sign in so we can give you training hours. And we're going to be able to send you excuse me, we're going to be able to send you a certificate for the training hours so that you can use that for public education. But we need your information to make sure that our process is credible. And so some of you entered your full name in when you signed into Zoom, and we can certainly get your information. If you ended up calling in or you're using some other means, like if you're on your phone, we may not be able to provide you with that certificate. So please just put your questions in the chat. Please sign in real time. And then we'll be ending at 11 for you to take lunch, and then we'll go from there. So with that, I am going to start off our first presentation. It's my pleasure. You'll see that on the agenda, we indicated that Charlie Johnson, which needs no introduction, that Charlie would be with us. Charlie was unable to join us, but he has built a wonderful team of presenters that are going to be with us today. And so with that, I want to introduce to you Joe Starling. He is no stranger to many, many of the fire service folks that are on here, and certainly the industry. He's the Chief State Electrical Engineer and Inspector for the North Carolina Office of State Fire Marshal. And also with him is Danny Thomas. And he is a state electrical inspector and code consultant with the North Carolina Department of Insurance Office of State Fire Marshal. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Joe and Danny to give us some knowledge around electrical safety, and you're in for a treat. They are a wealth of knowledge. And with that, here you go, Joe.
Kelly, can you hear me okay? So I'm Joe Starling, as Kelly introduced. I'm the Chief Electrical Engineer for the state, and with me is Danny Thomas. So this is the first time I've actually been on the NFPA Summit, and Kelly's asked me to come and give you some material from the electrical side of the house. So what I'm going to do this time, since it's the first time, I'm going to go through this, tell you who we are, what we do, and maybe how we can give you all our services so you can see how we can help you. And then if you can give us a lot of feedback on what you need, what you don't need, more importantly, sometimes, maybe next year when we come back, we can tailor it specifically to the majority of what people want. But anyway, we're going to go through what we do. I'm going to do a couple of fire investigations, walk through those and show you how we do those. And then Danny's going to take over and do a little short presentation on energy storage systems and generators, some of the new generator rules that's coming out. And if we have any time left, now that Charlie has had an emergency and couldn't be here, I'm going to go over this whole 2017 versus 2020 electrical code issue where single family homes and duplexes aren't going to the 2020. I'll go over how that happened and what's next on it. So I'm going to, if Kelly will let me share my screen, I'm going to get started. All right, Kelly, I hope everybody can see my screen. Is that the case? Because I can't see you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
it is in presenter mode, so I don't know if you have the ability to change the view because it's in presenter mode. And I'm gonna look at Bree because Bree Dugans is my go-to on all things technology. And she just happened to have her beautiful photo up here, and that girl rocks when it comes to changing settings. So she can probably on the fly tell us how to do that. So Bree, can you, I'm gonna ask you to unmute. Can you
go up to, yeah, I was gonna say, go up to display settings at the top of your screen and see if the drop down will allow you to switch it. Where it's, you see show taskbar, display settings, and in slideshow, go to the middle one. Up at the top.
Yeah.
Up at the top.
Yep. Up at the top that says display settings above the big picture.
They can see everything that's on here. So I still don't see display settings.
Yeah, so right across the top, Joe, where it says show taskbar in slideshow, right in the middle says display settings.
No, he's still in PowerPoint presentation. He needs to back out of the.
No, he can do it from here. Like what we can see on your screen, you should be able to make the change from here.
I think they're working off of 2 monitors.
So
that's what it is.
Yeah, the monitor that you see your presentation on, where you can see both sides, that's where we're looking.
I tell you what, let's do this. Let's extend the display real quick.
Thanks, y'all, for hanging on.
Now, if you extend your display and you just give us the side that is presenting, and whenever you share your screen, like you may have to go in and reshare your screen and give us the other monitor, then it may do it that way. Don't give us your monitor you're watching, but what would be the second one? So we're seeing the same screen again. The one that has your notes there you go. There you go. You got it.
Hey, thanks, Bree. Thanks, Joe.
Sorry. Okay. So this is who we are. We're the State Electrical Division, and what we do is a lot of things. We interpret the electrical code. We oversee testing laboratories like UL, things like Net Labs, ETL, things like that. We provide electrical education resources, which is what we're doing today. We're responsible for testing of school maintenance electrician because, believe it or not, my department is also the one, risk management, that insures most of schools in this state, with the exception of a few like Wake County and Mecklenburg, who are big enough to have their own insurance. And we inspect all the DOT equipment. So all these traffic signals, LED signs that you see on the side of the road, we actually inspect those. We inspect the services for them. So we're a field-based unit, which makes us very ideal for educating throughout the state. And we provide fire investigations. So even though we don't have original jurisdiction over fires in the state, the locals do the investigations. If it's arson related, obviously the SBI gets involved. But we get calls from the locals and the SBI when things look a little fishy sometimes and they need some electrical help. We'll go out and help the locals do that. So I'll step through the electrical page line by line so you can get to it. And if you have a dual screen, you can follow along. And we'll get to the fire investigation part, and then I'll start going through those. So the first thing we want to do, anytime you need to find us, if you'll just Google NC OSFM and then the word electrical, the very first thing that comes up will be our webpage. So if we click on that, it takes you right to our home page. Now, over on the right-hand side, there's this blue box, this blue ribbon, and you see where it's got red highlights the electrical division. Well, all our stuff is right under that. Those tabs down there take us to all the different resources that we have. So the first thing I want to do is get you to go down to the bottom of it where it says State Electrical Division Contacts. This is how everybody can find all our phone numbers. And of course, I'm at the top, and it's got my phone number. Please don't text me unless I'm expecting it from you, because I get too many people just send me random pictures and say, what's wrong with this? Well, obviously, I don't have time to go through all those. But anyway, there's our information. So it's me, Danny, he's sitting here beside me, Janet Whitaker, Chris Fawcett, and Tommy Green. They're also the state electrical inspectors. And so the next slide I'm going to show you, everybody can go to the Department of Transportation electrical inspections. It will take you to this map. And the reason I'm showing you this map, you see how it's color coded? This divides our district. So we all take a district. And under it, you see, so Tommy Green's district is the western side of the state. His counties are in green, Janet's are in purple, Chris's are in orange, and mine are in red. So the reason that this is important to you, not because you're going to call me to inspect your traffic signal, but because this is how we divide up the fire investigations. So if somebody in Davidson County needs a fire investigation, they would know, oh, call Tommy Green. Or if somebody in Pamlico needs one, I think that's Chris Fawcett, so they would call Chris. All right. Now, the OSFM, it actually has fire investigators that don't do electrical. We have Bill Marshall, we have Wayne Delancey, we got Taylor Marsh, Greg Harmon, Jerry Coble, and Mike Williams, who's the head of Fire and Rescue Division. They actually oversee the actual investigations as a whole. So what happens is typically people will call, say, Wayne if they're in Asheville. And Wayne will look at it and say, hey, we need electrical help. He'll call me. And so when I go out and do my part of the investigation, because I'm not a fire science expert, I'll ask Wayne or the local inspector, hey, you point me to the origin of calls here, and I'll start with that and put that in my report. After that, then I take off with the electrical. And so when I do my report, I give it to Wayne or whomever is leading this investigation, and they take my report and just make it part of the whole report. So that way I'm never out there trying to exceed my knowledge base and say, oh, well, I think the fire started over here. That's not what I do. All right, so now I'm going to take you through a couple of scenarios to show you exactly how some of this stuff plays out. So we're going to start out with this one. It was an attic fire in Knoxville. And what actually happened was the fire department got a call to go out and do this investigation. And everything was good. They said, hey, there's a problem with the electrical here. So hang on one second, I'm having computer issues. All right. So they went out and they pulled the meter. Said, all right, well, we just disconnect the power off of it. They didn't leave it like that, but anyhow, when we got there, that's the way it looked. So they pulled the meter, said, well, we just take the power off of it, and we'll come back and figure this thing out. Before they could get back to the station, the house caught on fire again in the attic. So they had to turn the trucks around, go back and put it out. And that's when the electrical inspector went out there and said, look, I need help. So this was Tommy Green's area. And he goes out there and he takes the panel cover off. And they had already took and put the main breaker in the off position, thinking that they had disconnected power. Well, as Tommy's looking at it, he looks up at the top lugs and he says, well, I see my neutral wire, my equipment ground coming in, but I don't see any what we call hot conductors going into the top of the main breaker. What's going on here? But he sees these two larger wires going down to a 100 amp breaker in the bottom of this panel. So he gets suspicious. And he starts tugging on the wires, and lo and behold, the wires come out. So he says, this seems interesting. So let me investigate a little bit further. So as Tommy asked somebody, well, where did the origin come into? They said the attic. He goes up in the attic. And what he finds out, this is an overhead service. What the guy had actually done was go in the attic where the service conductor from the utility comes in, and he had spliced into that service conductor. Now, how he did it without getting killed, we don't know. But we know that that was why the power or the fire department couldn't turn the power off to this house. And from the other violations that he found in this, it was reasonable to assume that, hey, the fire started here. So, and this is a legitimate reason of why. So that was one scenario. So now, switch gears. The horse hospital. So this is actually a recent one. I think it was less than a month ago. I get a call from Chatham County. Actually, it was Bill Marshall who was taking over this in Chatham County. And what you see here is a set of stalls. And what was on top was a dwelling unit for the farrier to live up above his horses. And so I actually went out there and did this investigation because they knew it was between the floors of between the stall ceiling and the floor of the dwelling unit, but they couldn't figure out why. And so what you don't see here is where the stud comes up the wall. On the ceiling of the stalls was a receptacle that was switched. So it had a switch, just turned the receptacle off and on, and a switch that turned the light off and on in each of these stalls. And so what was plugged into each of these receptacles was these nice fans that kept the horses cool. So they knew that, hey, they're laying on the floor, but they couldn't figure out a reason why they would catch on fire. So I go through it, and I take and examine all the wiring that was left. And the wiring that went to the receptacle where they were telling me the origin was, I could see clear arcing on that low end of that wire. You can see it beaded up right there. So I said, this looks suspicious. let me go and find out where the other end was. So I had to stretch it out to where the other end of that wire would have been. And I see these wires hanging out of the column, which goes down to the switches. So I got them to give me a ladder, and I go climbing up this thing. And on the other end of the switches, to load into that switch, lo and behold, again, there's more signs of arcing. And it actually continues on down that circuit. So I knew what had logically happened. Somebody went up there, and I could tell by the way it was wired, it wasn't real. It shouldn't have been an electrician that did it. So I could kind of tell that, hey, you had arcing in the first part of the load end toward the fan. And then I could follow it, arc map it back down toward the switches, and then on the line side of the switches. So it was reasonable to assume that that was the cause of the fire. There was a short in that wiring, and that actually started the fire. They had paper top insulation that was laying, or would have been laying right up against it. And I figured it caught that paper on fire. And that's why the owner, it was synonymous with his storyline that he had. So felt pretty good about that. Finally, we'll go into Carrboro. So I get a call. I was actually coming back from the western side of the state one day, and I get a call from Carrboro and said, Joe, we got a problem. I got a bunch of apartment buildings that have some illegal electrical work been done in them, and for I'll just say a very big cable company. And I don't know what to do. I know it's rampant throughout these apartment buildings, but one of them has just caught on fire. I need help. And I said, well, Mr. Inspector, you're in luck. I'll actually be coming through Carrboro in about 45 minutes. So I'll just stop by. Anyhow, we worked it out. I came by the next morning, which is fine. But the burnt unit, what they found, it was right in the place of where this electrical work had been done without a permit. And is right in the place of where this electrical work was done without a permit, and these new cable boxes were installed in the wall. So what we figured was a good idea, since it was rampant throughout the apartment complex. Well, let's ask the neighbor if we can go look at his unit. And he said, sure, come on in. So when I walk in, the first thing I see is the cable box that was recently installed, and you can see up the wall, that's not a shadow, that's smut. So that's not good. So let's dig in a little bit deeper in this thing. And the homeowner was nice enough to let me take his stuff apart, and when I did, I could see that the smut was coming directly out from under this box. And you can see how they've got these cable boxes, these routers and everything else just stuffed into this thing. Well, let's check out the back of the cover. Oh, yeah. So you can see it's getting way too hot. And of course, the homeowner, he's having a fit. And he's like, how could they let me do this? Well, I don't know what the answer was to prevent this from happening, but I know it wasn't good. So you can see down at the bottom of this cover, there are little vent holes. And I guess the guys that put it in were relying on that to distribute all this heat, but it just wasn't enough. So the reason I say it was illegal electrical work, let me go back to that first slide. So you can't really see it in this slide, but there was a receptacle on the bottom of this insert. And so that receptacle had to get power from somewhere. And where it got power from was the receptacle right on below it, just to the left. And so I said, well, how in the world did they get, because there's a stud that breaks the wall line there up between this cable insert and this receptacle. So I said, well, how in the world did they get the wire from this receptacle over to this box? And while it's hard to see in the receptacle box, you see that white wire that kind of protrudes out? what they did was they took a long drill bit, and when they cut out for this cable box, they just drilled through the stud and then drilled through the electrical box and shoved some wire in there. Called it a day. It works. But obviously, that's not the way it should have been installed. And that's probably why they didn't get a permit and inspection. So now you can see the receptacle in the bottom of this box. So doing a little bit more study, looking down into the hole, you can actually see where they drilled through the wood stud there straight into the box and wired this thing up. So that was a no-go. Plus, before I go to the next door neighbor's house, if you look, so this was done a few months prior, and they actually went out and re-sided this building with hardy plank. And if you notice, this is, you don't know this, but this is an exterior wall. And so if you notice in this enclosure, you can see where the exterior nails are shot through the back of this electrical box where they just use long nails. So it was eat up in nails. It's hard to see in the picture, but it wasn't a good scenario. That didn't cause, or that wouldn't have caused a fire the way they had it put in, at least in this unit. But obviously, that's why you don't do that. So anyhow, ask the next neighbor, hey, can we come in and see your house? Lo and behold, they got the same problem. So they got smuck running up the walls where this equipment's getting way too hot. It's been put in illegally. And the cover to theirs, that's what it looks like. So what we ended up doing was the inspector, the local electrical inspector, he sent letters to every homeowner in this complex and said, look, we want to come in and at least take the covers off so these systems can breathe, because right now they're getting way too hot. And we will clean up the issue of illegal work and get with the cable company and get this thing resolved. And that's what they did. And it's actually, it's still somewhat ongoing as far as getting this cleaned up, but at least everybody with all parties involved are now on board with getting it cleaned up. It's been about a year ago. So it brings me to my next scenario. So they had illegal work going on. So if you see illegal electrical work going on, obviously as fire officials, you need to contact your local electrical inspector. You also, anybody can contact the electrical licensing board. So ncbeec.org, that's the North Carolina Board of Examiners of Electrical Contractors. For short, we call it the licensing board, but that's the official name. And they have their own group of investigators. Tim Norman, who used to work here at OSFM, he's the director. You can call any of these guys if you feel something shady is going on. We encourage you to do that. And not to be that guy, but I actually sit on this board. So what I like to tell people is, if you've got a problem with an electrician, here's the process, but please don't tell me, because if you tell me and it does go to a hearing, then I have to recuse myself. So please keep that information confidential from me, because just like this situation in Carlborough, I'm glad I went out there and that's fine. I'll recuse myself. But in general, let's just follow that format so that nobody is getting everybody staying in their lane is what I'm getting at. And finally, if I do have any electrical contractors on this summit, the board does do a laws and rules class. We got a lot of good electricians, but not some of their ideas on what the law actually said are a little out there. We do free classes all throughout the state, about every month now, 4 hours of credit for your contractor's license and your inspector's license if you have them in electrical. But anyway, we do those classes. And now I will give it up to Danny. Give me 1 second to put his PowerPoint on, and I'll take any questions if anybody's got them, Kelly.
All right, no questions so far. One question though that did come up was, we're trying to find the North Carolina School Electric Inspection Form, and the North Carolina School Fire Inspection Form on the DOI website. So maybe at the end, you can take them real time through that. So we'll come back to that one if that's okay, Joe.
Sure, I think they took those down, school inspection forms. Yeah, I think they did take those down, but we can sure get them back up. When we went to the new website, I'll have to ask Charlie why they did that. It seems like there was a good reason, but let me look into that. In any case, we should be able to get them back up if there's no legitimate reason why they were taken down. Let me get the presentation going. All right, Danny, it's all yours.
Okay, appreciate everyone letting me be a part of this. So when Joe gave me this assignment, I didn't have a clue what to deal with. And I got to thinking, how could an individual only know something about the electrical code or provide something that may help fire investigators or fire inspectors or whatever. So I come up with this thing in regard to energy storage system. You know, and it's a short presentation. It won't be real long. And we're going to cover a few little articles and some parts of some articles. But you know, when I first started out, I've been doing this a long time. I was an inspector back. I began my career as an inspector in 1983. So yeah, I've retired from that, and I'm kind of working with Joe at Department of Insurance here at the State Fire Marshal. So I got to thinking, in the old days, we only really were concerned about generators. Perhaps some of y'all may remember those days, but we didn't worry about nothing but a generator. And then along come the batteries and the UPS systems. Look where we're at now. I mean, it's getting complicated. It's really some hard stuff to understand and be able to implement the code requirements into it. But anyway, we're going to talk about a few things, and it'll be short, 15, 20 minutes maybe. And I'll get this thing going. So we'll briefly discuss the following: energy storage system found in Article 706 of the National Electrical Code. Now, all of this information is based on the 2020 National Electrical Code. And so that's where it's coming from. So we're going to talk about the energy storage system that's found in Article 706 NEC. It seems like that's a big and coming thing now, small sizes and large sizes. Also, we'll discuss PV systems. Just a briefly, we'll talk on PV system that's found in Article 690 of NEC. You know, we don't have a curtain we can put over that sun sometime, or the moonlight, or street lights, and also we may find power on a dwelling or building at any time of the day based on this PV system. Also, we'll discuss a little bit about optional standby systems. And they all, like I say, all these presentations will be based on the 2020 National Electrical Code, which, by the way, just went into effect a few days ago. And so that's where we're at now with National Electrical Code. All right, let's talk about an energy storage system. Hopefully, it'll help you somewhat. So I've got a couple of pictures here on the presentation, and you notice they kind of small. But they get bigger than this, and they come in a whole lot larger size, a whole lot larger. But you may see these typically at perhaps a dwelling unit or a small commercial building. So we have the scope. I always like to point out the scope when I'm building the article, because we want to know what the article is talking about. If we don't have an idea, then we can't get it figured out. But notice it says here, this article applies to all permanently installed storage systems or ESS having a capacity greater than 1 kilowatt hour that may be standalone or interactive with other electric power production sources. Now, if you compare that scope to the 2017 code, then you're going to see it reads a little different. The 2017 code dealt with voltage, but this one doesn't. It deals with one, and skipping over the metric system, deals with 1 kWh. So that's a little bit of a change there. It goes on to say these systems are primarily installed to store and provide energy during normal operation conditions. Goes on to say, and here's a picture. Now, this is a large one. That one might cost a few bucks right there, but that would be a large system. And the scope was changed to clarify, but to bring clarity. They use that terminology all the time with the code, especially electric code, and it was the scope was changed to make it a little more clear on what it was addressing. So that's the scope. That's a piece of energy storage equipment. Then we get into a definition. What is an energy storage system? Notice it says one or more components assembled together capable of storing energy and providing electrical energy into the premises wiring system or electric power production and distribution network. It goes on to say in the information notes, now I don't pay a lot of attention sometimes to the information notes, but as I get older, I learn the more they help them. So these informational notes do help us. You got informational note number 1. Notice what it says about a ESS. It said it can include, but it's not limited to batteries, capacitors, and kinetic energies such as flywheels and compressed air. Energy storage system can include inverters or converters to change voltage levels or to make a change between an AC or DC system. Then we got one more note that we'll pay attention to here. Notice it says in information note number 2, these systems different from other storage systems such as a UPS system, which is a power supply used to provide alternating current power to a load for some period of time in the event of a power fade. So that's a couple of situations where the information notes help us. And so here's a kind of a picture. Now this is a large energy storage system here. I don't think we'd find it at our dwelling unit, but you might find it at a commercial location or perhaps an industrial location. So they're all capable of delivering power to our premises when the power has been disconnected from a normal source of power by the utility. So we still got power available. And so if we're out there fighting a fire or something like that, we definitely don't want no electricity in that building or that house or building or whatever. Okay, a couple of things in 706.4, it talks about the system requirements. And I'll cover these a little more in depth in just a second. But notice it says each ESS or energy storage system shall be provided with a nameplate plainly visible at the installation and marked with the following. So we got about 8 items there that this nameplate must comply with. Now we need this information on the nameplate to be able to do a proper inspection or make sure it meets the proper requirements or whatever. So here's a nameplate, kind of like it should look. Enlarge it a little bit. So item 1 is providing the manufacturer's name. Item 2 is providing the rated frequency of this energy storage system. Item 3 is providing, and I'll try to move its mouse around and show you. Item 3 is a number of phases. In that case, we know it's a 3-phase system. Item 4 is the KVA. It's required to have the KVA marking on it. That's important to note. 5, the available fault current. Now, that's a big deal for the electrical inspector, but you won't see that probably be an issue at a residential location. We don't have to deal too much with that issue right now at a residential location. But the electrical inspector would be involved with that if it's a commercial industrial installation. He'd want to make sure that equipment was rated for whatever that fault current is available. Number 6 would be the maximum output input current. That's manufacturer's got to provide that information. 7 is the maximum output input voltage. That's required to be provided because there is a maximum voltage for these signs. Then 8, what was a utility enacted capable or not? So that's requirements for the nameplate. Anyone inspecting this would expect to see that label on this equipment and provide all that information to us as needed. How about this? 706.5 listing. Energy storage systems shall be listed. It means it's got to be listed by a third-party lab, and they can't just do components or part of this equipment. It's got to be listed as, or should be listed as a complete unit. And we as inspectors of whatever nature, we want to make sure that it meets that requirement. If not.
So it was a third-party lab, then?
There's several of them. There's a list that can be provided by the state of North Carolina. I mean, there's several on our UL, CSA, EPL, Met Labs. It's many on there.
But if it's got Joe's engineering firm on there, is that listed?
No.
All right.
No, it would not be listed if it had Joe's or Danny's lab or whatever on it. So we're looking for a recognized testing lab that's listed by the state of North Carolina to do this type of listing and label. And like I say, Joe may touch on that in a few minutes, I don't know, but you can find a listing on our website, Electrical Division website or web page. So I want to make sure it's listed. All right. Look at 706.6, multiple systems. It tells us here that multiple energy storage systems shall be permitted to be installed in or on a single building or structure. So we're not limited to just one, it could be multiple. And here we get into about the maximum voltage. Notice it says 706.9 says maximum voltage. The maximum voltage on ESS shall be rated ESS input and output voltage. And you see where I've got the red box come up around it. That would be the maximum output input voltage. So we know what we're dealing with. In that case, it's 850 volts. (706.15) it talks about a disconnect means. Very important component. And you'll notice it's got a couple of requirements here, and starts out part A, it says, energy storage system disconnect means. A disconnected means shall be provided for all ungrounded conductors derived from an ESS and shall be permitted to be an integral to listed ESS equipment. When I say ungrounded conductors, probably most of y'all realize I'm talking about a hot conductor or energized conductor. As electricians, we call them hot, but it could be called an ungrounded conductor. But that means hot. A conductor could be used as a hot conductor. Would you agree with that, Joe? You're young. Would you agree with that terminology?
Yes, well, I've called it hot all my life.
Yeah.
So that's telling me that I gotta have a disconnect on the load side, whatever that thing's powering. I've got, as a firefighter, if something catches on fire in the house, I gotta be able to run up to this ESS system and clearly know I'm shutting down everything on the load side that is powered.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, let's take that one step further. We've got an item one. Well, we have a couple items. It says the disconnected means should comply with the following. One, readily accessible. What does readily accessible mean? Does that mean I climb, crawl, move boxes, whatever? No, that means I can walk right straight up to it and I shouldn't have to climb up on nothing, resort to portal means. I shouldn't have to move anything out of the way. That means I can walk right straight to it and get to it in real quick like. So that disconnect means it's got to be readily accessible. Also, on item 2, it says that disconnected means shall be located within sight of the ESS. So when we look at the definition of ES within sight in Article 100, that means it's got to be 50 feet, no further than 50 feet away, and it's got to be visible. If I'm saying that to disconnect, I got to see the ESF. And if I'm saying the ESS, I got to be able to see the disconnect. And I can't be over 50 foot away. So let's see, it goes on to say it shall be located within sight, but then it turns around and says, whereas impractical to install a disconnect within sight of the ESS. Well, I got to admit to you, I haven't thought of any situation yet where it might be impractical, but no doubt some will come up in the installation of these things. So if it's where it's impractical to install a disconnect within sight of it, the disconnect shall be installed as close as practical. And the location of disconnected means shall be field marked on or immediately adjacent to the ESF. The mark shall be of sufficient durability to withstand the environment involved. And notice settings shall not be handwritten. So we want to make sure whoever is reading that can read it. It's legible where it can be read, and it's not going to go away due to any surrounding environment. Also, it says on item 3, the disconnected means shall be lockable open in accordance with 11025. So that will allow someone, if they need to cut it off and leave it off, to cut it off, hang the padlock in it, and no one else has that key, they should not be able to turn it on. Now, notice it says for 1 and 2 family dwelling, a disconnected means or remote control shall be located at a readily accessible location outside the building. Now, remember, I told you this is 2020 code. So there's a requirement in the 2020 code for a disconnected means emergency disconnect outside a residential dwelling. But keep in mind, 1 and 2 family dwellings under 2017 requirement, National Electric Code requirement. So this would not be a requirement based on the 2017 NEC. Hope everybody's straight on that.
Back up 1 second, Dan. Let's go over that one more time, so everybody. So I know everybody heard you. So you're telling me that the 2020 NEC requires a disconnected means where if this ESS system catches on fire, it requires me to be able to put a disconnect outside the house so the firefighter can run up and shut it down in event of emergency. Because it don't matter how if you shut down the utility or not.
Right.
That ESS is going to be pumping power throughout that house.
And keep track.
But the 17 code doesn't have this requirement in it.
No.
And because of some other things that I may touch on later, the 17 code is the governing document for the 1 and 2 family dwellings.
That's right.
So I don't get the luxury of having this disconnected means.
Right. So that means if I was somebody need to cut that power off in a hurry, I might have to hunt for it a little longer than going to the service and finding that device to shut it off.
That means I got to go inside the house and be able to find
Yes.
a disconnect on or close by that ESS system, which may be the cause of the fire as it is.
Could be. Yeah.
All right.
So hopefully everybody understands that now. So maybe one day we'll get to 2020 NEC for the entire electrical installation, and then it would comply with that. But right now we don't have it. Got to drop back to 2017. Okay, so here's a little drawing I made trying to kind of explain that. It's disconnect means got to be readily accessible. We just read that. Disconnect means shall be readily accessible. Means we can walk right up to it. Yeah, all right, and it's got to also be located within sight of the ESS. If not installed within sight of it, it must comply with other requirements provided. Now remember, it said the disconnected means is allowed to be an integral part of the ESSS. And I got a hunch that's what you're going to see on most occasions, especially residential and small commercial. You'll definitely see it be a part of the equipment rather than be a standalone disconnect. But whatever, that's a disconnected means, it would shut it off. Then it said if it's impractical to locate within sight of, and I tried to think of several ways I could draw that, and I couldn't come up with nothing but put the door, having a reason, put the disconnect on the other side of the wall. So I got my label on it and telling, and it said it's got to be labeled installed, a mark telling you where that disconnect means is at. And I just made a simple note, the disconnect means is located on the outside wall. Now, I got enough sense to know that we need something better than that. We need specific information on where that disconnect means is at. So notice it said it can be on the equipment or located immediately adjacent thereto. That's pretty close when you say located immediately adjacent thereto. That's right beside it. So you have that option, but we need clear details that would help us find that disconnect in a hurry if we needed to find it.
Hey,
If it's
Danny.
not installed inside of it.
Hey, Kelly's talking to you.
So we had a question right where you are, and so it didn't get lost. Richard Lubbock said we're talking about a meter pack combo on the outside of every residential home. Is that correct?
Talking about a meter pack on every home?
He's saying, so were we talking about a meter pack combo on the outside of every residential home? Is his statement or question?
I think what he's getting at, Kelly, is the emergency disconnect in general requirement for single family dwellings.
He's saying for disconnecting purposes. Is that correct?
Yes. So not here. This is specific to energy storage systems. So if anybody doesn't know what this is, these are battery packs that people are putting in houses that act just like generators. So there's two disconnecting means issues going on here. We've got one for these energy storage systems, and then it sounds like what he's talking about is another code issue that I was going to touch on a little later that talks about the service, the utility emergency disconnect that was required for firefighters to be able to run up and shut that house down from the utility.
Okay,
Now, that is a whole nother can of worms that I'll address after this presentation,
okay,
because
great.
we did lose that too.
Okay. So we'll
Okay, so it
hold
sound
that
like-
question, Richard, and I'll go back on mute. Thank you, Danny. I just didn't want
Oh,
it to
no
get
problem.
lost in the mix. Thank you.
Yeah, be sure to, it wouldn't be sure to be thinking about anything that might be questioned, but Joe will touch on that in just a few minutes. That's what I was talking about in regard to 23085, I believe requires emergency disconnect. So we'll see how that goes in a minute. All right, no further questions. I'm going to move on. Then also 70615 talks about a remote activation. It says where patrols activate the disconnecting means of an ESS are used and not located inside of the system, the location of the control should be field marked on a disconnecting means. So you go to disconnecting means, and if you got a remote activation, you'd have to put this label on that disconnecting means and denoting where that remote activation device is at. So if someone's using that, kind of a little bit tricky on this language. Anyway, I said, hey, I just make a label and say, tell it the device is located on southwest interior wall of the building. Now, I know it would take something probably more than that, but a lot of this stuff is new, so we're getting into it, trying to learn what it's saying and study and do some research and see what the requirements of the electrical code are. But that's my short version of what that's trying to say right there. So I would have that label installed on the actual disconnect means, saying, hey, I got a remote location that you can cut this disconnect off and on with, and here's where it's at. Part C says notification and marking. When you look at that disconnect for this equipment, it says each energy storage system disconnecting means shall plainly indicate whether it is in off, open off, or closed on position and be permanently marked energy storage system disconnect. Well, to me, that's very important because I know then that tells me what I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with something that, hey, providing, even though that power company's disconnected that power from that dwelling or building or industrial facility, whatever, I still got an energy storage system. Somebody don't do something with, it's pumping voltage in that building on those wires. And that could be one of the worst things we face as someone that's in that building if there was a fire going on. But anyway, that's got to be provided. That alerts you what's going on. The disconnecting means should be laserly marked in the field to indicate the fire. So notice you don't do that at the factory, you do it in the field because that's some things that you're going to need to know that you only can find out in the field. Okay, also it's got to be the nominal ESS AC voltage, maximum ESS DC voltage got to be marked. The available fault current from the ESS. An R-face label applied in accordance with acceptable industry practice. Data calculation form. So it's going to be a little different label than what we have from the manufacturer, but this will be installed in the field. And basically, as electrical inspectors, we're going to look at for the electrical contractor to buy this unless he gets something from the factory that would meet this. But they'd have to help him with it based on the conditions in the field. Notice exception, it says list items 2, 3, and 4 shall not apply to 1 and 2 family dwellings. So that's under the 2020 code. Now keep in mind what's going on with the 2017 and 2020. So that wouldn't be applicable to 1 and 2 family dwellings. Now I didn't look back in the 2017 code and see how it dealt with. So we'd have to check that language in the 2017 code for 1 and 2 family dwelling. Also, the energy storage system disconnected means where the load and line and load terminals may be energized in the open position. The device shall be marked with the following words of equipment. So hey, that thing might still could be energized. That type disconnect means. And it says warning, electrical shock hazards, terminal and line load side may be energized in the open position. So you definitely want a marking for that to make you a lot going on. Could be when you're not dealing with that and you want to know all information that's available. You want to know everything that's going on with that system. And of course, we comply with 110.21b for the size and colors and all that stuff. We'd have to go back to Article 110 and specifically Section 110.21b to address that part. So here's kind of what we want to look for. That's a marking energy storage system disconnect. So in my mind, that's what I made put on there that's telling us that's what it does. And here's the label we want to look for. This should be field installed, something on the order of that label, warning, and it's the available fault current is something we'd have to know after it's been installed based on what the power company may tell us available. So that would need to be installed in the field. Perhaps some of it could be factory installed, but you might have to write in some blanks, this, that, and the other. So you want to see that label on the disconnect. 706.16 talks about connection energy sources, and we would have other energy sources. I mean, I think they make these systems of all kind of power, often sources of power to supply them. I know we got generators, PV systems, probably whatever else, batteries, all kinds of stuff. So anyway, this says the connection of the ESS to a source of energy shall comply with 706.16A through F. So we've got several different things here. We'll briefly look at them. A talks about a source disconnect. It says a disconnect that has multiple sources of power. So disconnect all energy sources when in opposition. And I think I've seen, and Joe, correct me wrong, but I think I've seen some of this stuff installed maybe with a generator and a PV system, possibly.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's all kinds of stuff that's producing power now.
Especially with the PV systems, because what they're doing is letting the PV systems exclusively charge these battery systems instead of providing the system straight from the PV to the house itself.
Yes.
And I mean, that works perfect. But until you have a failure, when all catches on fire, you need to isolate it so you can shut it down quickly.
Yeah. So I reckon we got a lot to learn with this stuff going forward.
But these energy storage systems, I just firmly believe that they're going to replace generators almost completely within 10 years.
Very well could. Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so I hope all y'all were able to hear our conversation. That's great. So it's got a disconnect. You got to have a disconnect that has multiple source power. So disconnect all energy sources when in opposition. Wherever that power may be coming from or other energy, we may want to, or we do need to cut it off. B, it talks about identified interactive equipment. It says the ESS operating parallel with other AC sources should use inverters that are listed and identified as interactive. And hopefully we inspectors will get that all right for most all situations actually. C talks about the loss of interactive system power upon loss of a primary source of power, and ESS with a utility inactive inverter shall comply with the requirements article or section 705.40. So yes, article 705 works hand in hand with energy storage system and PV system too, as far as that goes. D addresses unbalanced interconnections, and it said unbalanced AC connection between an ESS and other AC electric power production sources shall be in accordance with 705.45. So we got to work back and forth with these things. E talks about other energy sources, and it says the connection of an ES other energy sources shall be in accordance with 705.12 in parts 3 and 6 of Article 712. Article 712, I haven't even done a good research of that one yet. And then we get to the standalone operations. It said where the output of ESS is capable of operating in standalone mode, that we got to meet the requirements of 710.15. They apply to it. We get over 706.20 in general. We talked about Part B. I just stowed up here about dwelling units. Once again, I got to remind you, this is for the 2020 code and this requirement. An ESS for 1 and 2 family dwelling units shall not exceed 100 DC volts between conductors or 2 ground. We can't exceed 100 DC volts. Exception says where we have live parts are not accessible during routine maintenance, ESS maintenance. A maximum ESS voltage of 600 volts DC shall be permitted. Then we got to address the spaces about this equipment in the storage system. And Part C deals with that. Notice it says here that working space for ESS shall comply 110.26 and 110.34. And I know y'all not able to answer the question, but if I asked you what did 110.26 was dealing with, you would say, well, that's the clearance or workspace required for 1,000 volts or less. 11034 would be over 1,000 volts. Workspace requirements over 1,000 volts. So that's what it's talking about. We got to comply to meet those working space requirements. Then we talk about space between components, and it tells us ESS shall be made to have space in between components in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions and listing. So yeah, we want to make sure we got those installation instructions on site when we inspect them. If we involve in the inspection process, we want to make sure they're in. There's probably some of this information that needs to stay with that equipment throughout its life that may help someone that has to not only work on it, but has to come there and disconnect it or do whatever. 70621B talks about a directory or identification of power sources. It says ESS in the storage system shall be indicated by markings or labels that shall be in accordance with 11021B, which if you'll take a look at that, that talks about the font sizes and maybe some of the colors or the wording and that type of stuff.
So in other words, I gotta know when I walk up this disconnect mains, this is exactly what it's for. I can't just take a Sharpie out and start writing ESS, things of that nature. No, it's got to be legitimate. It's got to be where a firefighter knows this is what I'm looking for.
Yes, most definitely.
And so what you probably don't know, Danny, is in the new fire code, there's I say the new, I think it's the 21 version that they're working on. There is a new chapter 12. And if you go through that chapter 12, it's just for energy storage systems. It's got a lot of the same language in it.
Right. Well, that's good.
So they may actually get the fire code out before we get the 17 code reverted back to single family dwellings. The problem is the fire code doesn't apply to single family dwellings. It only applies to commercial buildings.
So Joe and Danny.
Yes.
Lewis Garrison from the Asheville area says that Duke Energy has installed some of these ESS battery storage systems near their transformer station. And we have one in Buncombe County. And it says it's a utility hidden in the trees and looks just like some storage trailer buildings and a fence. So that's one of the challenges they're facing is the placement of these, notification of them, and also identification of them, to your point about that marking.
Yes, and you're starting to see them do ESS and vehicle charging stations. Duke Energy themselves are contracting with cities. I think Mecklenburg's got this contract out where it's kind of fuzzy on who actually owns the charging station, but we think it's the city of Charlotte. And so then it becomes, well, who has jurisdiction over it? Well, the way I look at it is if Duke owns it and they maintain it, in other words, if it breaks, who's going to pay to have it fixed? If it's Duke, then it's theirs. If it's Charlotte, then it's theirs. So if it's Charlotte's, then it falls under the local jurisdiction. So the electrical inspector would go out and verify it meets the code. The problem is, even though Danny's showing you a lot of code here, it's still lacking. And so this whole deal with the manufacturer's instructions, that really comes into play because like Generac's got in this game and they'll have manufacturer's instructions that say, hey, you need 3 banks in a garage for say a 3,000 square foot house to run it properly. Well, we got to have 3 feet between our battery banks in case one of them, they use the word fails, which means if it catches on fire, we don't want it setting the other ones on fire. So we got to have 3 feet of separation. And the only place that comes from is their manufacturer's instructions. Well, then you got Tesla that has gotten in this game and they allow their battery packs, you still need 3 of them, but they stack on top of each other. Well, then the argument comes when you're putting such load on the exterior walls of the garage that now is it causing engineering issues with bolting these things to the exterior walls that are load bearing. So there's all these unknowns that we're just getting into. We're at the tip of the iceberg with it.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so back to 70621 about the directory. say they gotta be installed in accordance with 11021B. Goes on to say, Part A talks about facilities with utility service and ESS. Plaques of directors shall be installed in accordance with 705.10 and 712.10. So we got to consider those other articles and sections in it. So facility with standalone systems, and it says those plaques of directors shall be installed in accordance with section 710.10. So that's a whole lot to know and keep up with. Now, I did find out, I saw this other day, there's a document, NFPA document 855, that provides a lot of needed guidance for Article 706. So I cut and pasted a couple of things here just to show you what it's addressing. On administration, notice it says 1.1, it says this standard applies to design, construction, installation, commission, operating, maintenance, and decommission of stationary energy storage system, including mobile and portable energy storage system installed in stationary configuration. And then I looked at 1.4.1, it says unless otherwise specified, the provision of this standard shall not apply to ESS installations that existed or were approved for construction and installation prior to the effective date of this standard. So that's a couple of things about it. And then I noticed in another part, it says the documents and portions that are listed in this chapter reference within the standard and shall be considered part of the requirements of this document. So what I'm trying to say is a lot of NFPA documents that come into play with this specific NFPA 855. But you can see it's a long list, and you can access these if you have a way of getting on NFPA.org. They have a way of getting on that, and you can look at these documents, and you just set up an account and create a password, and it's no, you can do it free of charge, and that's great. It's great help on there for all of us, and I'm sure y'all know how to get on there. Anyway, all these documents are part of that standard. So just briefly mention that. So NFPA 855 provides a lot of help, especially with residential location. All right, how does energy storage system in combination with the PV system work? I've got a couple little old things here that just tells us a couple of things. We find this, of course, here's PV system. We've seen all this stuff, different locations, residential, commercial, industrial. Seems like it's going up everywhere. But 697.1 says general and energy storage system connected to a PV system shall be installed in accordance with Article 706. So here we are in 690, but it's saying, hey, if you've got an energy storage system, then you've got to refer to Article 706 and the requirements of that and dealing with it. 697.2 says self-regulated PV charge control. The PV source circuit shall be considered to comply with requirements, and here's a section 706, shall be considered to comply with requirements of 706.33 if, so we got some conditions. One, the PV source circuit is matched to the voltage rating and charge current requirements of the interconnected battery cells, and two, the max charging current multiplied by 1 hour is less than 3% of the rated battery capacity expressed in ampere hours or is recommended by the battery manufacturer. So what I'm pointing out is, hey, the energy storage system comes in play with the PV system. And if you were to look in 690, you would find 690.71 that addresses that and sends us over to 706. Now, the last thing, remember the generator I said earlier was the old-fashioned way of providing power to a location if we lost our utility power. Now, we call it an optional standby system, but most homeowners and hospice and commercial locations, and even they call it emergency power, but it's not emergency power, it's optional standby power. But anyway, we'll call it whatever we want to, but the code listed as an optional standby system, and it's found in Article 702. And we got the scope, and I'll just throw this out because I like to always address the scope. Notice it says this article applies to the installation and operation of optional standby systems. The systems covered by this article consists of those that permanently installed in their entirety, including prime movers and those that arrange for connection to a premises wire system from a portable alternate power supply. So most time it says prime mover, but we're going to see the generator as the prime mover. at most locations. The definition of this thing, and the only reason I'm pointing this out, there's a change in this definition. Notice it says those systems intended to supply power to a public or private facility or property where life safety does not depend on the performance of the system. These systems are intended to supply on-site generated or stored power. They've added that word stored in there, or stored power to select loads either automatically or manually. So now we got to be concerned with stored power. So I reckon, Joe, can we think through that? I reckon we could consider a storage battery an optional standby system possibly, based on that word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is, that's the future. So you think about this, people don't want to admit it, but you might have a hospital or a building like the Albemarle building here with its backup system being a battery pack.
Yeah. So that's the change there. Transfer equipment. Of course, we want to know where that transfer equipment's at, because a lot of time it's a disconnect on some buildings, service disconnect. But anyway, it says transfer equipment shall be required for all standby systems subject to requirements of this article, and for which the electric utility supply is either the normal or standby source. In 702.5E, I thought this worked in conjunction with energy storage system and all, and specific Article 705, transfer equipment and electric power production systems installed permit operation parallel with normal source shall also meet the requirements of Article 705. So yeah, we can't just throw 705 out when it comes to an optional standby system. It works hand in hand. 702.6 talks about signals. All to help us know what's going on. Audio and visual signals devices shall be provided where practical for the following purposes in 702.6A and B. So I just threw B up here because to me that would be important, carrying load, to indicate that the optional standby source is carrying loads. Now we do have an exception. Say, hey, I'd like to know if it's operating when I'm there. If I'm dealing with an electrician, think I got the power off, I'd like to know that. Of course, I may hear the generator running, but maybe I don't. Anyway, it says to indicate the optional standby source is carrying load. Exception: signals shall not be required for portable standby power sources.
So if a battery pack was the optional standby system for, say, this building, the Albemarle building, what would that look like? I mean, would you have audible and video signals throughout the building, or just where the energy storage system is?
I haven't dug into it, but I know I couldn't hear it if it's on the outside of this building. I'm inside, right?
Right. So again, that's something that also I bet Chapter 12 of the Fire Code is going to address, and we just don't have it yet.
Yep. All right, now I think this is about my last slide coming up in just a second. Signs. Notice Part A says standby. A sign shall be placed at the service equipment for commercial and industrial equipment that indicates the type and location of each on-site optional standby power source. Well, just because I pull up on a scene don't mean that I can see a optional standby system. May not hear it, may not see it. So that'd be great if a fireman rolled up there and was getting ready to drag his water hose out and start spraying water, that he knows whether it's a generator or an optional standby system putting power in that building. I don't think I'd want no electricity in there when it's running. So with that sign would say, wait a minute now, don't forget you got a generator sitting out here about 200 yards away from a house or so on and so forth. And you want to make sure that disconnect for that is off. And here again is a 2020 language for 1 and 2 family dwellings. A sign should be placed at disconnect means required in 23085 that indicates the location of each permanent install or on-site optional standby power source. Disconnect or means to shut down the prime mode is required. So that goes with the 2020 code. We're not using 2020 code for 1 and 2 family dwellings right now. So that would not be applicable unless it's in the 2017 code.
So now let me stir it up a little bit, because this is a burr of my saddle. You telling me as a firefighter gonna run up to a house and shut down the main breaker on the outside of the house, thinking everything's good, and there's nothing that in the code that's gonna require a directory to say, hey, this isn't the only place you guys shut down to turn this house off?
Well, we got our sign that says it got it, but it ain't gonna be a dwelling unit. It's not required to be a dwelling unit unless it's already required by the 2017 code. So yeah, that's a problem with the 2020 code.
Now, I know we got stuff for PV systems. That's already in 17 to say, hey, you got an interactive inverter and all that, you got to shut down. But if I had a generator say on the other side of the house. Now, granted, a generator is pretty easy to spot, but still, when you're in a hurry, you see my gripe with this?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah,
All right.
because we got a requirement in 2020 code in 23085 says got to have emergency disconnect for that dwelling,
But we can't enforce
but we
that.
can't enforce it. That's right.
Okay.
Then I got Sino 2.12 outdoor generator sets. Portable generators greater than 15 kW and permanently installed generators. It says here where an outdoor house generator set is equipped with a readily accessible disconnecting means in accordance with 44518. And the disconnecting mean is located within sight of the building structure of 5. An additional disconnecting means shall not be required where ungranted conductor serve or pass through the buildings or structure. So I don't remember, well, I'm not going there. I'll hold off on that comment. Goes on to say where the generator supply conductor terminate a disconnected means or on a building or structure, the disconnected means shall meet the requirements of 22536. So basically, when you go to 22536, and that talks about it's got to be listed for suitable use of service equipment. And that's a requirement that we find in the code. So this is basically concludes my part on this. And if you have any questions, be sure to share them and we'll see if we can come up with answers. So at this time, I'm gonna turn it back over to Joe.
All right, Joe, so as you're kind of transitioning, one of the comments that came up for Danny would be from Lewis Garrison in Asheville area. Our EOC has a UPS system that feeds the dispatch center. Utility power runs through the UPS to fill the gap before the generator wakes up. That keeps the digital radio system from resetting in a power gap. Is that UPS and ESS similar? Are those two systems similar?
Yes, it's almost the same thing. The UPS is just smaller because it's running a limited supply system. What the ESS is, you can buy 20 kW, just like you can buy a 20 kW generator, ESS now to power the building, to power your house. So it's taking the place of the actual generator. These things just almost overnight, they figured out how to get the power production out of these capacitors and battery systems so that it would serve a house for several hours, just like a generator would, almost identical to the power of a generator. The problem is, obviously, it's a battery. It's almost typically always a lithium-ion battery, which we know from our fires with Teslas and other things that are using these type of electric car batteries. The fire industry is having issues with when they catch on fire, putting them out and having these things explode on them. So what we're trying to do is get the codes in effect so that, okay, if the house does catch on fire, maybe possibly before it gets to the energy storage system, you could shut that system down and contain it. Or if the energy storage system is the fire itself, maybe somebody can shut it down without getting too close to it and be able to isolate that part of the system. Because if it takes 3 packs to run a house, 3 of these banks, and I've got them separated in coordinates with the instructions. If one catches on fire, then the idea is we don't want it catching the other 2 on fire. And so there's all these other requirements that the manufacturer's instructions starting to see in there. One of the ones that I didn't know until about a month ago at a meeting was 5/8 gypsum board sheetrock if you put it in a garage. So you've got to have that area where the battery systems are per Generac's installation instructions with 5/8 sheetrock. They don't just get to go into an open frame attached garage and mount it to the wall. No, can't do that anymore. So, and it was for that reason of isolating if that storage system was to have a failure. Okay. So I'm going to march on. Y'all heard me speak a little bit about oh no.
Yeah, just resume your slideshow and it should pull it up, Joe.
Give me 1 second, Kelly.
Yes, sir.
There we go.
All right,
And
it's in presenter mode again.
hang on 1 second.
Yep, I'm just navigating from here.
How about there?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Cool. So you heard me fuss a little bit about the 2017 being used for the 2020. I was going to go into the fire investigation technician, and I got enough time. I'll do that real quick. And then I'll talk about the 2017 versus 2020 code and what's happened. Fire investigation technician, obviously OSFM teaches that, and electrical has become a big part of it. So I'll say this, we're a big part of it. We're a piece of it. Anyway, so like with the Connex buildings that they do the live burns in, we actually started wiring those and putting power on them so that when the live burn goes into place for the students, they get to see what happens to the electrical system. And we've got some walls built where we just burn wires and let them figure out, like, all right, based on the circuitry, where it started and things like that. So that's coming a long way. And I'm actually personally working with the ATF and Emmitsburg to try to bring their stuff that they do. If you've never been before, it's worth going to North Carolina, to our fire technician educational program. And that's where we're heading with that. So that's actually, you see Rob, he went to Huntsville with me to the ATF facility, and they've got it set up where you can go in and build a simple service. And actually putting your hands on it and building these services, it gives you more intuition of how it actually works. So you can't replace that experience. Something else I'll mention real quick, Fire Marshals Association, been talking with them, and hopefully next year, I've got a little class I put together on the basics of electricity, like how it actually works. And it's simple enough. Anybody with any background can come in and learn something about the basics of how electricity works. And I've modified it a little bit. It was when I started teaching at Code College back in 2017. That was just the basic physics of it. And I'm modifying it for fire. And so if somebody wants to do that, yeah, just keep an eye on that, because I'm going to hopefully be doing that for the Fire Marshals Association. And I see Tony Smart was on here earlier. He's been nice enough to let me use Winterville's staff as the guinea pigs to see, hey, let's try it one time and see what works and what doesn't. So I think that'll be good for everybody. Okay, and qualified testing laboratories. I made a big deal out of this a while ago because, again, it has to be a legitimate lab. It can't be Joe's Engineering. It's got to be somebody like UL that seals this equipment. As a matter of fact, it's not just energy storage systems or generators, panel boards. It's all electrical equipment. In this state, we've had a law on the books since 1933 that requires all electrical equipment be listed by an approved North Carolina lab. Most of the NERLs, that we call them, national recognized testing laboratories, are recognized in this state, but we have actually a few more that aren't NERLs. But there's a list. I'll go back to the slide. There's a list. If you go over to Qualified Testing Laboratories, that link down there gives you that list of labs and what they can and can't inspect. So if you have a fire somewhere, you think it's electrical device, look for that label. And this is the statute. It's in Article 4, Chapter 66. The commissioner or any electrical inspector is the one charged with enforcing these statutes. So it has nothing to do with the code itself. It's part of a state law that this stuff has to be listed and labeled. Okay, now let me finish this thing up with this whole 2017 versus 2020 code. So some of you who are in the inspections world may know, be keeping up with what's going on with the electrical code and how it works. So it's obviously NFPA 70. We use the NEC in this state, and we have used the NEC in this state since 1905. The Fire Waste Act was actually modified from 1901 to 1905 to include electrical inspections and the requirement that all buildings receiving power be wired to, at the time it was not the NEC, but the early version of the NEC. So it is NFPA 70 now. And when you go to this page, State Electrical Code and Interpretations, you will see a link to the NFPA and the free access viewer. And right below that, you'll go down, you'll see the 2020 State Electrical Code is the 2020 NEC with state amendments. And then excluding 1 and 2 family dwellings. And that's part of the amendment package. It's amendment 10.1 and 10.2. So you can't just open the NEC and see these amendments. What you have to do is go down and print these things out. And it's in that first link that says 2020 State Electrical Code Amendments Compact Version. And I make this specific for the citizens of the state, because if you had to read the legal version, it would be far beyond what anybody would want to put themselves through. So this is the old 1905 law, National Board of Fire Underwriters is what it used to be called. In any case, then in 69, it went to the NEC. Actually, it was before that, but they started putting this thing in about approved state building code council. So the building code actually adopts the NEC now. It's not just adopted by law. And from the 14 code, you can see that we had 3 amendments back in 2000. I'm sorry, this is the 11 code. In 2011 NEC had 3 amendments. Well, let's see how many we got in 2020. Oh, we jumped up to 32 amendments. So maybe in 2011, you could get by without knowing what the amendments were because there was only 3 of them. But now it's almost imperative. You must have this amendment package with you to read the state electrical code. Okay, so here's how it actually works. Building Code Council assigns an ad hoc to revise the code. The ad hoc chair brings the code as a B item to the Building Code Council. The B items then may go to a C item for public comment if the Building Code Council accepts it at the B item. C items then automatically go to the D item stage for the Building Code Council to vote, and then approved D items go to Rules Review Commission, which is another agency, and they determine if it's legal or not. And the effective date is set usually before it goes to Rules Review. So what I'm saying here is, in a B item stage, that's 1 council meeting. Well, they only meet 4 times a year, every 3 months. So when it goes to a C item stage, 3 months have passed. When it goes to a D item stage, another 3 months have passed, and then about 3 more months to get through Rules Review. All in all, this thing takes about a year from the time you start submitting it to the Building Code Council. Any amendment is like that. So what happened with the electrical code, ad hoc met in January 2020, then we had COVID. All right, so normally we would have had our ad hocs done in about 3 months because we only hit the major issues in electrical. We don't go through the whole book. But COVID happened, so it got stretched out all the way to September. Building Code Council denied the ad hoc chair request because there was a lack of agenda. So it was brought again back in December of 2020 as a BI. All right, so there was no residential single family exemption. It was 2020 state electrical code. In March, that's when the public comment stage happened as a C item. Lots of people spoke up about it. In June, it went to the D item stage. Again, there was no residential exemption in the amendment package at that time. In August, it went to Rules Review Commission, and the commission objected because of this statute over here. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into this, but that statute that you see on the screen, 143-138D, that is the 6-year rule statute. And what the Rules Review Commission said is, hey, we've got this issue with the 6-year rule because the new addition of the NEC would affect 1 and 2 family dwellings. And that's not allowed by this statute. That was, it was actually put in law in 2013, I think, but it didn't become effective on the codes until 2019. And so what the law basically says is, hey, you can't do anything to the residential code for 6 years till 2025. Well, that includes any type of code that would affect the residential code, including the electrical code. So now, the way it's reading, we can't do any type of electrical code modification until 2025 that would affect 1 and 2 family dwellings. So what the Building Code Council was faced with, there's the law. So only every 6 years, and it starts in 2019. Now, I know that doesn't affect the fire code because the fire code doesn't have any, the scope doesn't include 1 and 2 family dwellings, but it does affect all these other codes that have 1 and 2 family dwellings in them. Even in 2000, I guess that's 2014, the Building Code Council didn't even know that this would be effective to the electrical code because they made a motion to adopt all the other codes on a 6-year cycle except the electrical. So this was in 14 after this law was actually signed into law. They put the electrical on a 3-year code cycle. So it was a surprise to everybody. So what the Building Code Council did, they had a special meeting and they said, all right, here's what we're going to do to get our 2020 code going ahead. We're going to have to exempt 1 and 2 family dwellings by amendment. And so when it went back to rules review in October, they accepted that. And so now we have the 2020 state electrical code in effect as of November 1st. But by amendment, 1 and 2 family dwellings and their accessory structures and equipment would be forced to go to 2017 state electrical code. And there's the amendment. If you opened up that package I showed you a while ago in red, that's what it says. So that's why, and I'm going, for time's sake, I'm not going to go through all this. I'm going to skip ahead to, there's an interpretation on the scope. What all does this mean? So, because some people are going to say, well, what about townhouses? Well, yeah, it includes townhouses too, because that's part of the scope in the residential 1 and 2 family dwelling code. What about swimming pools? If it's as accessory to a 1 and 2 family dwelling, it includes them too. So you're going to have to wire your swimming pool in accordance with the 17 state electrical code. Well, does that mean the amendments and interpretations for the 2017 NEC apply to a 1 and 2 family dwelling, townhouses and their accessory structures? Yes, because that is the 2017 state electrical code. So that's how it's written and that's what it means. And that interpretation hopefully walks everybody through that so there's not too much confusion. But now for you guys, and I did these as question and answer that I just did. Let's go back to this that was mentioned a while ago. Emergency disconnects. So this is what the gentleman that Kelly referred to a while ago was asking about, I believe. Meter packs. They have a meter up above or on the side usually, and then they got a main breaker in that panel that's with it. Well, that would have been a legit way to satisfy this 2020 NEC requirement for emergency disconnects to be on the outside of 1 and 2 family dwellings. The fire service pushed for this change in the 17 NEC and didn't get it. They got it in the 2020 because a fireman wants to be able to run up to the house and shut it down as quick as possible. Sounds like a sound idea to me. And so they wrote this in 2020. This is the actual code language. For 1 and 2 family dwellings, all service conductors shall terminate in disconnected means having a short circuit current and all that installed in a readily accessible outdoor location. If one or more disconnect is provided, they shall be grouped. So that forced the installers to give you access to these disconnects shown down there. The problem is it's only for 1 and 2 family dwellings. The second problem is, as you see, North Carolina, that won't happen until 2025 at the earliest, unless something changes. So here's the other side of this. Again, there's the law. Can there be any amendments that affect the residential code since 2019? Because rules reviews are saying no, even though, now let's think back to this, we've had several amendments go in, not just on electrical, but just residential, for the residential code itself since 2019. So can I go in and put in an amendment at the Building Code Council that modifies handrail rules on a single family dwelling? Or is it just for code adoption? Nobody actually knows. That's where we're at in this state. So what NEMA has proposed, and they're bringing it in December as a B item, since the exclusion to 1 and 2 family dwellings was by amendment, well, they just put in an amendment to exclude that again, which would then make 1 and 2 family dwellings part of the 2020 NEC. Now, this obviously has got to go to the Building Code Council in December, and I don't know what the attorneys will say. But yeah, this is consumed my life for the last probably 5-6 months. And with that, what time we got, Danny? I don't want to keep this too long. 10 to 11, that's a good time to stop right there. Kelly, do you have any people that need further explanation? Oh, I did write down fire school inspection forms. I looked for it while Daniel was talking, didn't find it. So if you will, shoot me an email to remind me, and I'll get you an answer on that.
Well, so Barry Overman actually found it. If you typed it into the search engine on the OSFM site, you'll find it under Code Officials Qualification Board. You'll find it there. So that's there. Excellent. So I'm just going to ask if y'all can enter your questions in. I know that was a lot of information. And Danny mentioned 855, and certainly we're going to talk about that this afternoon, that new standard from NFPA. You don't have to be a member of NFPA to access that. You can view it online. And we'll also talk a little bit about Link, which is the online subscription service, which is replacing the fire code subscription service. So that'll be this afternoon from 2 to 3. We're going to walk you through some of that, but that was a lot of information. And we certainly are seeing these energy storage systems and PV showing up in very rural communities right down the road from my house. There's like 3 houses with solar panels, and we're seeing this more and more. And unfortunately, you're probably, Joe, you know, your electrical folks locally are probably going to see some of these fires coming from PV. And who do you call? How do they help? I was just in Texas, and they were talking about, you know, how do you do this? So one of the questions that came in is, how dangerous is it to have charging stations for a car in a garage? And I will punt that to you, Joe and Danny, but I would also say that this is also an issue with not just a single garage, but a parking garage. And we're seeing these charging stations in parking garages. And the NFPA Research Foundation just released a research report on the parking structures and what hazards this presents, things we have to consider. And so I just want to mention that. But can you address that for Carmen Martin, who was asking about charging stations for cars and garages?
The truth is, we don't know. We don't have the statistics on it. And so what we would really like for people to do is, if you have a failure of these systems, let us know so we can keep a data bank and keep some statistics on it. For me, I can just smell down the pipeline a lot of junk coming in from overseas. I mean, I can just feel it coming. And so the only thing I've got in my arsenal here to protect us is that third-party listing laboratories. That is so important. We cannot lose that, because if we ever lose that, well, we're going to say that Tesla's charging systems don't have to be listed by UL or somebody like that, we'll never get that junk out of the state. And, you know, if you've got utilities putting them in, they're not really governed by us. So Duke Power wants to set these things in, and they may get into a parking garage. I don't know that, but I can foresee something like that. If they do that, I've got no power to tell them it's got to be listed. They could put anything that they wanted to in there. So the short answer is, I don't know how dangerous they are, because it is such new technology and we just don't have enough on it.
I'm just going to show you right now. I'm going to just share screen and show you where you can find this research report. Hopefully you can see this. Do you see the research report, Joe?
Yes.
Okay. So you'll find it. This is kind of the I call it the rabbit trail, the footprint of it. You can find it right here, where to find it. But if you want to read about these hazards that occur and download that report, that certainly talks about it. And there's also a webinar that we did on this. So if you want to learn more about parking structures and energy storage systems and hazards associated with it, this is a great way to get some professional development on it. And you can just access it online. I'll give you the footprint again. Go to nfpa.org, news and research, data, or you can just put modern vehicle hazards in parking garages and it'll pull up in the search feature. So that goes along with that. Any additional questions as we kind of finish up before lunch? I'm gonna give you just a minute. If you wouldn't mind, enter those into the chat. Joe, that was a lot of information y'all covered. Really great as far as, you know, helping our fire service partners. Okay, the next question is, would a dock of a pier come into play with the 2017 residential code for boat lifts? How does that tie into this, Joe?
So that's a good question. If the dock itself is an accessory to a 1 and 2 family dwelling, then it would fall under 2017 state electrical code. If it's for any other purpose, then it falls into the 2020. So don't look at it as if it's just residential, because that can mean a lot of things. What if it's for apartment complex? Apartments are still commercial. What if it's mixed use? Say they got a marina on the bottom and then a living unit on top. Well, that's still a commercial setting. That's not a 1 and 2 family dwelling. So that falls within the 2020 NEC or state electrical code to wire that dock. The only ones that fall back under the 2017, if they're a direct accessory to 1 and 2 family dwellings.
All right.
Same thing with a swimming pool. You might have a swimming pool for a townhouse. All right, that's going to be 17. But if you got a swimming pool for a townhouse community, that's not the same thing. That's not a direct accessory to that one townhouse that's built under the residential code. See how
you,
confusing this is gonna get.
He's an electrical contractor, but he's also a fire marshal, and that answered that question. So thank you for the clarification on that. Just another minute. I know we're wrapping up for the first half of today. If you have any last questions, drop those into the chat. One of the questions that came up was, do we need to sign in more than once? The way we're doing this is if you signed in through the little roster that we posted, and I'll post it again. If you signed in this morning, then that'll give you credit for the morning. And then at 1 o'clock when we start back, you'll sign in again, and that'll give you that afternoon, because we know some people can only come a half a day. And so we're kind of doing it on the honesty system. If you wouldn't mind signing back in after lunch, that'll get you the afternoon sessions. The way it's going to work is we're actually going to have Brett Brenner with the Electrical Safety Foundation International. The executive director is going to be here to talk about some resources on how you can get some of the latest updates. They're also in this electrical space. And then we're going to end the day with some updates from NFPA on how to, like the latest resources and things related to electrical safety, just some general updates to kind of keep y'all informed, because we have a different group here. So with that, I just entered in the chat the roster again for you to sign in. If you'll sign in to that little link that says HTTP forms, it just asks for a few questions for us to track your information so we can give you training hours. And if there's no more questions, y'all can go and grab some lunch. This platform will stay open during lunch. So if you want to leave it up, you can. If you want to log back in, you can certainly do that. I want to thank Joe and Danny for a great job, and thanks for spending your morning with us. That was a lot of information. If you have any additional questions, Joe, if it'll be fine, if we have any other ones pop up, we'll send those to you a little later.
Okay, Kelly, if you would just call me. I've got to drive about 8 hours, so I'm going to take off, but just call me and I'll be glad to answer them.
Absolutely. Thank y'all so much. And we'll see you at 1 o'clock. We'll start back. So enjoy your lunch, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
For us.
Every day, we take our electrical safety for granted. When was the last time you thought about your own level of safety? When was the last time your electrical system was updated? As a world, we are plugged into more gadgets and gizmos than ever before. Upgrading our electronic devices and appliances has become commonplace. But has your home electrical system evolved with them? If not, your newest gadget, your home, and your loved ones could be at risk. When it comes to safety, the Electrical Safety Foundation International believes there is no reason for an average of 2 deaths a day from preventable electrical hazards. Did you know that this device found in your bathroom and other places where water and electricity could come in contact has helped save thousands of lives over the last 30 years? Or that this device could prevent 7 emergency room visits each day from children who are severely burned after inserting common household items into an electrical outlet. ESFI can teach you how these safety devices work, where they should be installed, and how to tell if you are already protected. ESFI can also show you how to test and maintain your safety devices to ensure they keep you and your loved ones safe. For the past 20 years, ESFI has been the premier nonprofit organization dedicated to your electrical safety, both in the home and in the workplace. We help you to understand electrical concepts, codes, and standards so that you are empowered to take charge of your electrical safety. ESFI provides a vast library of online tools to help you minimize the electrical hazards that are present in your everyday life. Our website caters to people of all ages and audiences, complete with printable learning tools and online games. Together, we can prevent deadly electrical accidents and injuries before they ever occur. Join us in May for National Electrical Safety Month, fall as we talk Fire Prevention Week, or the holiday season as we work together in our campaign to make safety a tradition. ESFI partners with a variety of community organizations such as schools, businesses, media outlets, and local fire departments. All state-of-the-art programs address current trends and provide innovative safety solutions through the information channels you already use. This multifaceted communication strategy achieves over 4 billion media impressions each year. As our lives become more plugged in than ever before, we face new challenges to our electrical safety. Do your part by supporting ESFI and champion this important cause. Visit www.esfi.org to learn how you can get involved. Safety is smart. Prevention is power.
So that gives you an idea of who we are. So we worked and we were founded in '94 by Underwriters Laboratories and the National Electrical Manufacturing Association. So a lot of times people ask us, well, how are you funded? Traditionally, about half our funding comes from electrical manufacturers. So the names you might know: Eaton, Schneider, Siemens, GE, ABB. But we also have a lot of association partners as well, and that goes up and down kind of the electrical supply chain. So everybody from utilities all the way down to government organizations. And so we really kind of cover the gamut of folks along that supply chain. So when we do a program, and much like many of you all, the drivers are the data and statistics that get put out there. So NFPA is obviously, with NFIRS, is the biggest source that we have for data. And so we look at a lot of different data sets from NFPA. We also look at Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, and OSHA. And we've kind of come up with some unique data points when it comes to electrical injuries, which I'll get into the next slide. But we also do consumer and workplace surveys to get an idea of what's going on out there in our communities to figure out what we can do to answer questions that they might have. And some of the biggest things we've seen come online have been, new technologies, electric vehicles, solar, PV has been a big issue that we've seen come onto the market, as well as energy storage. And all these are things that everybody has concern over. And with the Biden administration rolling out the infrastructure plan, it's going to start to fast forward some of those things, whether we like it or not. And I think what's going to have to happen is we've got to be prepared for that. And we in the safety community, and you all that need to put out all the emergencies that are out there, we know what's going to happen when all this when the rubber starts to meet the road. And we've got to be in front of that. And so what we're trying to do is talk to a lot of our partners in that electrical supply chain and try to say, all right, what do we need to do to kind of get ahead of this as much as we possibly can? Because we know we're going to start to see some lagging indicators of people getting hurt and devices kind of unfortunately failing as well. So to give you some background on the electrical injuries that we're seeing and deaths that we're seeing in the workplace, let me try to set the scene for you. So when it comes to electricity, the most deadly place that you can be is on a construction site. That's not a surprise because you have a lot of different trades in a construction site. Typically, who is being hurt, it's 60 to 70% of the time, it's somebody that's untrained with anything electrical. So that means it's a roofer, a general contractor, a painter, you name it, is going into places they shouldn't be and they're getting themselves hurt. More than likely, they're coming in contact with an overhead power line. And that could be anything from a dump truck driver to a boom operator that's raising their bed into overhead power lines because they're always focused on looking down and calling 811, which is great. But many times in that same corridor, you've got overhead power lines and they're not thinking about it. And so they're not looking up as well. And so what we're trying to do is set the scene to say construction sites are unique in the fact that there's a lot of different trades. You've got overhead power lines and temporary power lines that are out there. And then it's the people that are least being, or the least, that are being hurt the worst. And so we've got to try to figure out how we can do something about that. But that gives you the idea of the trends that are out there. This gives you a flavor for, what kind of events and fatalities are out there. And what you'll see is when number 6 is contact with electricity. So it is a pretty deadly thing. Obviously, transportation is number 1, slip, trips, and falls, that kind of stuff. There are other issues out there we can't tackle, but electricity is up there. And so we're trying to figure out what we can do to bend that safety curve down. This gives you an idea of who's being hurt, what they're generally doing when it comes to OSHA, how they're categorized. So electricians are obviously number 1, but it quickly adds up when you add construction laborers, tree trimming, occupations not reported. That's catch-all, obviously. Heating, air conditioner, roofers, painters. So you add all those up, and that's where you start to get the 60 to 70% of the people that are unqualified doing any electrical work at all, are the ones that are often being hurt. This goes back to the point of 60 to 70% of the people that are untrained in electrical occupations. And so that means they're not getting any training whatsoever. So they didn't know what they didn't know, but unfortunately it's costing them their lives or a serious injury as well. So what are we doing about that? What's the foundation trying to get out there? What message are we trying to get out there? So what we do is kind of a three-pronged approach. One is we gather the statistics. Two, we go out there and we put anything we possibly can on social media. And three, we try to create a lot of virtual video and infographics, which you'll see coming up, to try to address the problem that we're trying to bend the curve on. And so this is a great example of one of the videos that we put together for workplace safety and the kind of situation that we see. This video is actually taken directly from an OSHA report, and this is how a fair amount of people have been killed over the last 20 years. So let me go ahead and play this for you and give you an idea of what we're talking about.
Hey, Brett, if you can see if you can put your volume up just a little bit. I know the last video was a little low, but you could hear it. And so I just thought I'd tell you if there's a way to bring the volume up.
Okay, let me see if I
Thank
can do that.
Okay, thanks.
If you can stay on screen, Kelly, and just let me
Yes,
know
sir.
if it's good volume or bad volume. Try something.
Overhead power line.
Let me try something. Is it about the same unfortunately, I don't know if there's anything I can do. Yeah, unfortunately, I think you're above my pay grade, unfortunately. Let me see if we can figure it out.
Cause 40% of all
That's
electrical
great. Thank you.
fatalities in the workplace. A majority of these accidents occur with workers who have little to no electrical safety training. That's why it's important to always look up before doing any kind of work on a construction site. It could save your life. If my buddy had raised the bed into that power line, both the line and the truck be considered live and dangerous. Now, if you see equipment in contact with the power line, it's not time to be a hero. You need to stay away, warn others to do the same. You should stay at least 35 feet back. It's about 2 dump truck lengths. If conditions are wet, you may need to move away even further. If you're inside the vehicle, stay inside. Warn others to stay away and call 911. Do not exit the vehicle unless you see smoke or fire. Now, if you must exit the vehicle, do not touch the ground in the vehicle at the same time. You must jump from the vehicle and land with both feet together. Then, avoid lifting your feet as you slowly shuffle away from the down power line and the vehicle. Remember, if you see a down power line, stay away, call 911. But to avoid major accidents like this in the first place, be sure to always look up in all ways.
Safety is smart. Prevention.
So again, I mentioned overhead power lines are the leading fatality cause of fatalities out there, according to OSHA. When it comes to electricity, it gives you an idea of overhead in the yellow versus other electrical fatalities, but overhead is definitely where we're seeing the most contact, and that's because it's just raw power, and if you touch it, you're really going to be in a bad situation. As you can see, trend lines are going up in terms of fatalities. They've been pretty consistent, so we've been lucky on that front. But as we start to get out of the COVID fog, my guess is we're going to start to see a lot of these buildings, existing structures out there that are going to be repurposed. And what that's going to mean is to be profitable, we're going to start to compress more and more work schedules, which means you're going to have more and more people on a compressed timetable, more and more people in the same position, more and more people needing some kind of power to run their equipment, more temporary power lines and those kind of things. And that's something we're concerned about. So, electricity is not going to, take a day off. And so you've got to just be careful, especially as we start to come back and repurpose these buildings, which we know is going to happen. It's just a matter of unfortunate timing. Let me skip through some of these statistics, and I want to give you some ideas of other things that we've got going on in the foundation and give you some other things that are going on. So let me play this for you real quick.
If you're ever in an accident that involves a utility pole and a down power line, always consider the line and the vehicle to be live and dangerous. Onlookers, such as myself, should never attempt to get close to a down power line or attempt to drive over one. If you're in the vehicle, stay put and warn others to stay at least 35 feet back from the power line.
Don't come any closer. Stay back.
Then call 911. If you see fire or smoke, you'll need to exit the vehicle immediately. As you begin to exit the vehicle, make sure you do not touch the ground and the vehicle at the same time. Jump from your vehicle and land with both feet together. Then avoid lifting your feet as you slowly shuffle away from the vehicle and power line. If you separate your feet too far, you'll become an open circuit and could be electrocuted. Make sure you shuffle at least 35 feet away from the vehicle and power line. If the conditions are wet, you may need to move away even further. If you come across a down power line, stay away and call 911. Remember, to avoid accidents, always look up in all ways.
Safety is smart. Prevention is power.
So that gives you an idea of kind of the consumer message that's kind of the same when you come in contact with an overhead power line, but also you see the workplace message as well. And so we have a lot of content out there that might be useful for you all to kind of teach your trades in the communities that you serve, but also the residents as well, just in home safety and those kind of things. So some of the issues that we know are coming our way, like I mentioned before, these are two draft infographics that we're working on right now for first responders. It's interesting that we're talking to this group, but these ideas actually came from some utility partners that we have. So the large utility associations, the Public Power APPA, which is the Public Power Association, as well as EEI, are sponsoring with us, and they're actually on our board now, providing some direction on what kind of things can we tell first responders and what they need to know about PV as well as EV. And you'll see that this is probably pretty familiar with you if you know that the codes and standards that these are based off of within the PA. We basically took these and put them into kind of picture format, if you will. And so you can take these and break them up once they're available. We probably have available in about a month or so. But basically, we just wanted to kind of make sure that, first responders have got a tool out there. They can kind of reference it if need be. But also just talk to things you need to be doing to make sure that businesses in your community are letting you know if they're making these upgrades and putting these things on their roofs or having these energy storage systems, because you all need to know about that if you've got to respond to something. And again, I'm talking a little bit out of turn because I'm not familiar with what each jurisdiction or what each state requires you do. But I do know that if people aren't telling you something in the fire service, it puts you all at unique risk. And so it's one of those things where I know a lot of us like to talk about community risk reduction, but it's also you didn't know what you didn't know. So how do we start to get folks to realize that as they start to put in electric vehicles, photovoltaics, or energy storage, they kind of have to make sure that they're doing their part and letting you all know what's going on as well, so they don't put you all in harm's way. This also goes into when we start talking about disasters and backfeeding issues. We know all about that as well. But again, you'll see these coming out here shortly. And hopefully this will provide another tool that you all can use in your arsenal. I mentioned one of the things that we've been seeing a lot of is disaster safety. Generators are probably one of the biggest killers that we're seeing out there when it comes to electrical. Obviously, it's a byproduct, but the off gases from that is obviously the biggest concern we have, and that's where we see the most deaths. But on the utility side, we also see a lot of utility workers being hurt by backfeed, by proper transfer switches not being put in to these portable generators. And they really just provide a lot of headaches for folks that are out there. And, unfortunately, when things are energized and you think they're not energized, that's when the problem comes up. I mentioned concerns we have around temporary power. So this could be anything from a dump truck driver to a big rig driver, anybody that's operating any kind of a boom or something like that. We want to make sure that those folks, crane operators, are really looking out for overhead power lines not to put themselves into bad situations, but also getting down to the more localized use of power, because what we want to do is make sure that people are using simple things like extension cords and exterior ground fault circuit interrupters, those technologies as much as they possibly can to keep their workers and themselves safe. Additional things. So in the video that we first played for you, we talked about May as Electrical Safety Month. That's our big promotional month. We're trying to be as proactive as we possibly can. And the things that we're focusing in on are things like smart homes. We really don't care what the hook is to get you start thinking about electricity and using electric safety safely. But we want you to think about the new things that are coming on the market. So whatever thing is that's going to get you interested in going up and down the aisles of Home Depot and Lowe's, we want to make sure that you're kind of thinking about safety and how that can affect everything. So things like space heaters, we've got a lot of fires that have popped up since COVID because people are working from home. And so we have a lot of great information on things like space heaters, HVAC in general, water heaters, lighting, you name it, smart homes, whatever the hook might be to get you start thinking about what you need to do to upgrade your home to make yourself safe. We've got something on that topic, I can promise you. We're a wealth of knowledge on that front. On the safety side, when it comes to the workplace, gone are the days where you can have just a retired military vet or somebody else out there that could be a building manager that's a jack of all trade, a general contractor, where you can go around and kind of fix things in buildings. More and more, we're seeing more contracts being written by electrical contractors, trade contractors, electrical engineers that really know how to work these systems in these larger buildings. And it's important that we start talking to the right people to make sure that they understand what's in their buildings and what some of the unique dangers might be. So as we start to put more and more EV chargers into buildings, what is that going to mean to something that goes wrong? If there's a fire inside of a garage with an electric vehicle, how does that change the situation? And so those things we've got to think about. I think we've headed off a lot of the EV possible dangers. But as you start to bring more and more of those chargers into buildings, what's that going to mean in terms of power and how somebody could potentially get hurt, which includes you all being the first responder. And so how do you start talking to those managers to get that dialogue going to say, what can we do to kind of keep everybody safe? And just talking out loud to make sure that people in your community, include the first responders, make sure that they understand what's out there and what dangers are in certain buildings as well. Talked about photovoltaics. We're seeing a lot more of those come online. Unfortunately, again, we rely on lagging data and how NFIRS is reported. So it will be 2 years before we really start to see any kind of trends with any of these things coming on the market. But again, we want to make sure you all are safe, but we also want to make sure that consumers are understanding what they need to do on their part too, not to get themselves into bad situations. Simple things like not coming entangled with utility lines, meaning carry your ladders horizontally versus vertically. Simple things like that will keep people safe, but also keeping them aware. So the tagline of our thing, always look up in all ways, is very appropriate for what we're trying to get people to think bigger picture about things. One of our big campaigns that we've got coming up, so I would encourage you, if you're not the comms person, if you've got a comms person or a community outreach person in your group that you talk to, we can become a great resource for content for them. The biggest thing we've got coming up now is going to be holiday safety. So we've got a ton of cooking safety, a ton of stuff coming out for tree safety, and you name it, gifts giving safety, space heater safety, all that kind of stuff. We've got a lot of resources for that. So we encourage you to use those, even just tap into social media where you can follow along with what we're posting. You can easily reshare this stuff. We've got great press releases. We're pitching news stories all over the place. We can give you canned talking points. If you want to go out and talk to the media, if you've got a contact, we can give you all the background information that you could possibly want. We've done enough of those, and I'm going to be going on my media tour here shortly where I'm on a bunch of news channels as well. So anything that you possibly need to do, any kind of an interview, we've got that stuff pretty much canned to include infographics and pictures and all that kind of stuff, and plenty of tip sheets. So feel free to tap into that stuff. We're here for you. Make sure this stuff gets out in your community, and I'll tell you the easiest way to tap into us when we wrap up this conversation. But this gives you a good idea of what we got coming out for the holidays coming up. Mentioned holiday cooking. That's obviously the next big thing that we're all going to be dealing with. Talking about smoke alarms, talking about utilizing proper cleaning practices. We get a lot of questions on what they should be doing, especially during COVID, about what homeowners should be doing around electrical appliances and what they should or shouldn't do. So we've been answering a lot of those kind of questions. But really just get out there and make sure that you're, waving the flag that you always do for safety, fire safety, and holiday safety, and we're here to help you. So I would encourage you to sign up for our monthly newsletter that gives you anything new that we think is important that's coming out. And that's obviously a free thing that we put out every month. Additionally, you can go to esfi.org and sign up for that. But if you follow us on social media, you'll get pinged with those things as well. And it's as easy as pushing the share button or like button, and we'll be able to get you in contact and push out the information that way as well. In addition, we've got our resource library, like I mentioned before. It's an easy search function that's at the top of our page. So if you want to know things about extension cords, which is probably our most popular topic, as much as I'd like to say we do other things, it feels like extension cords is everything we talk about all the time. But it's a timely message in terms of getting those things upgraded, making sure they're not, duct tape with grandpa's extension cord isn't duct tape and, falling apart, and you're using that outside during snowy months and during the holidays. It can lead to some real issues. And so there's a lot of tools available. I mentioned before, 133 different infographics on various topics, from workplace all the way to home safety to community safety. We've even got some Spanish resources as well. Our website, if you hit the upper right corner, I believe you can actually translate everything into Spanish on screen. So we do have some other languages available. And then if you've got any other, if you have a comms person or somebody that you'd like to reach out to our communications person, you'll see her email down below if you want to collaborate or have any other future opportunities that you wanted to say, hey, do you have data on this particular topic? Or hey, we had an electrical incident. Is this something that you all can give us some poignant infographics and give us some direction on what we should be telling the local media? Many of the times, unfortunately, we're out chasing the ambulance. So people don't care until something goes wrong, which I'm sure you hear all the time. But an unfortunate event often leads to a fortunate opportunity to educate those people that could learn from the mistake that somebody else made. And so we're here to hopefully be proactive, but unfortunately, a lot of times it's being reactive. But again, you got to take it where you can get it. And I feel like we've got some great resources for you all to tap into. I think that's about it. That's my contact information. If you need anything from me, you know where to find me. So Kelly, I don't know if I'm short or long, but I'd be happy to answer your questions.
I was wondering if you have time, would you take us through your site? Because your site is amazing and you gave us some snapshots, but would you be willing to kind of go to your site and show them some of this, since we have a little bit of extra time in real time?
Yeah, let me see if I can pull everything up.
Okay, and this is great. We had some questions today earlier. We had the the chief electrical folks in North Carolina, and some of the things that came up where they were asking about charging stations in garages, both in individual homes. And so the information you gave is right on target with what we needed. But I was thinking, since we have a little bit of extra time as people are kind of putting their questions into the chat, maybe you could take them real time to your website and let them see all the different resources that are on there, because I get so excited when I see all these infographics. I'm a nerd like that. I love that you can put data into pictures and use it. But yeah, if you can share your webpage and walk us through, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll do the best I can. And to piggyback off of something you said, we're always looking for, kind of the what's next thing. So make sure that you're reaching out to us or Kelly or NFPA and just kind of telling us what you're seeing out there live in the field. You're our boots on the ground. And it's important for us to hear from you to say, look, this is something that we could use some information on. What can we do to kind of get out to this vulnerable population? One of the great things that we're going to be doing, hopefully in the future, is going to be able to work with our utility partners and really kind of focus in on, I'm sure in many of your all's communities, you've got particular language barriers for a particular group that's in this one area. We can actually we can create those infographics that will get out for a specific topic through in a specific language to kind of put out that emergency that kind of pops up. And so we're here for you. So let me just go through things. Obviously, we talked about some of the proactive things that we've done or we do on the home safety side, but things, mentioned seasonal safety, mentioned fire prevention, that give you an idea of some of the tools that we have available for your electrical system. So we obviously tap into a lot of the stuff that NFPA has, but in terms of smart homes, whatever you could possibly look for on that side of the fence, we have a lot of great stuff for that. Your electrical system in general, the average home was built in the 70s. And so people are using things that are creative, to say the least, by the do-it-yourself side of things, not understanding what simple things like, what is a grounded outlet? What does my service panel do? How do I at least turn off energy to particular appliances if something comes up? Things that are a little more recent, like arc fault circuit interrupters. We've got some great stuff on that to try to educate folks on that aspect of things. And we've got some great statistics on those. So, the website is a wealth of knowledge. On the disaster safety side of things, we've got a lot of great stuff on preparing pre and post for the storm.
Hey, Brett.
Go ahead.
Are you on the web right now?
I am. Am I not sharing my
Okay.
screen?
No, and so that's why I thought I'd just stop you. It's still in the PowerPoint mode. So downsize that and reshare your web page, because I don't want them to miss this. It's so good. We could just listen to you talk about it, but I knew you were talking through different. Oh, we got it.
Okay. Sorry about that. So this gives you an idea of, I'll backtrack a little bit. This gives you an idea of some of the different, sections that we have. So home safety is some of the pre-produced stuff that we have. On disaster safety, it's really becoming the precipice why most people are starting to look for us to say, how do I keep plugged in? How do I have emergency power if I don't have a generator? And so a lot of things are coming on the market between, electric vehicles that could serve as not only your EV, but also as your temporary power as well. And so a lot of things are going to be changing relatively quickly, and we're very interested in that because I think it's going to be a big topic of discussion. But things, on the disaster side of things, I'll try to walk you through the website a little bit. Things like brownouts, right? We've seen a lot of stuff on the West Coast. We do touch on that a little bit. Floodwaters, so that can come from snow, that can come from burst pipe in your home, that can come from torrential rain. We have a lot of great stuff on that. So just give you an example of what that looks like in terms of things that we have on that. But it gives you an idea. You can download the whole attachment. It gives you some great one-liners that you can use, but you can also kind of take this piece by piece. Your communications person should be able to take this apart relatively easy and use it for different messaging as it's appropriate. So again, there's a bunch of resources, I think is what Kelly was getting at when I'm trying to drive you to. But really just to say, here, there are a lot of resources and you're not out here alone trying to talk about a lot of these subjects. We really are trying to get in front of this stuff. And it's been interesting dealing with some of the emergencies, the quote unquote disasters, emergencies that we've seen, and the fact that there's a lot of similarity in a lot of them, but the human nature part where people want to have power all the time is not unique to anybody. And people are, I think, very interested in electricity. And if that gets them talking about other things that includes fire safety and upgrading smoke alarms and making their homes smart and plugging into Google and Alexa so they can kind of be a watchdog for you as well, even if you don't have a wired in security alarm or fire alarm that would contact an ADT agent. A lot of these devices are now so smart that they can tell you if something's wrong. And so all these things, it doesn't really matter what that hook is. What's important is that we're trying to get them talking bigger picture. And that, something simple can lead from electrical safety can lead you right into fire safety, and people will be, more keen in and interested on that side of the fence as well. We have a bunch of stuff on kid safety, so you can tap into any of this stuff. Mr. Plug is our mascot, if you will. We've got a whole thing that we did with the Kids Corner that we've done with Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, about trying to educate children. So we have a bunch of cartoons, we have a bunch of games, interactive games. We have 4 seasons of safety. So there's a myriad of different things that you can tap into here. We could even put your, your fire station's logo on the website. You can link it directly with your logo on it to our website if you want to. All you gotta do is reach out to us and contact us. We'll be happy to co-brand something like this for you. But it gives you an idea of kind of the breadth of stuff that we have. A lot of this stuff, this is a holiday one. I'm not going to play it for you because I'm sure you're aware of it, but it is kind of funny. The kids have been watching it pretty regularly, and it's something that I think the community could really benefit from. Let me bounce out of here. Kelly, how much time do we have to stretch?
You have, well, you don't have to stretch.
Okay.
We have until 1:50, but there's just so much while we have you for an hour, which is a big honor in North Carolina because we watch your work from afar. I just wanted to kind of take them to those resources. And if you are done with the website, we can certainly go to the educational messaging document because I'm not addressing that in my section, and I've got it pulled up if you want me to pull it up. And I thought, you're the SME on that group for electrical safety, and there was a lot that we added in because you gave a subject matter, expert as that. You gave us a lot of things to think about. So at the point, show them as much as you want to on the website because I know they don't have time to dig. So you pulling up some of this stuff is very useful.
Okay, so just two more real quick things. So the resource library, you'll see where my cursor is. You can search anything that we have, various topics, and it'll give you all the different things that you're looking for. This will give you access to the 175 or so infographics and videos based on topic. You just type it in here. So hit the resource library, or you can search it up here in the search bar. And if you come here, just search it here. And then I mentioned a lot of the workplace activities that we have, or workplace safety activities that we have. This is kind of a new foray from us. We've been focused primarily on the residential side, but on the workplace side, we really are trying to get more involved with all the things that are out there, from the NEC to 70E. Whether you know it or not, 70B is going to be kind of overhauled and become more of an active standard where you're going to have more talking of maintenance and operation, which is going to lead to more, hopefully, resiliency, which is kind of the key word. Resiliency for the utilities, resiliency for electrical supply kind of equates to CRR in a way, where I think that the names might be a little bit different, but I think we're talking the same language. And again, a lot of our stuff is focused on overhead power lines and some of the dangerous electrical work that folks do in the electrical business. But now we're going to be starting into a lot of the excuse me, the untrained folks that are out there. What can we do to kind of prevent a lot of those injuries? So Kelly, I'll hand it back over to you. I think that kind of covers the website if you want to go through the EMAC talking points. And while you pull that up, I'll just give you some background if you didn't see that video that we did through NFPA's virtual conference. But a lot of the EMAC stuff that we touch on, electricity is sprinkled throughout that. So it's like, where does the electrical section stop and start? And I think for us, electricity is almost vital to all this stuff. And so what do we do to make sure people understand that side of the fence as well? And so EMAC I've been honored to sit on that and provide my insight on that panel. And I think we've come up with some pretty good things this year, and there's been a fair amount of changes. So Kelly, I'll hand it over to you to kind of give an idea of changes that we made and kind of what we're doing on the EMAC.
Yeah, and so if you want to stay live, we'll go through. You can see the makeup of the Educational Messaging Committee, and I just wanted to make sure that hopefully y'all see. Can you see this, Brett?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where the Educational Messaging document lives. It lives under nfpa.org, public education, and then educational messaging. Now, the quick link for it is nfpa.org/EMAC, EMAC. And when you go there, you click here and it will let you download it. I save it on my desktop because, to be honest, I love a printed copy of it on my desk. But if I'm ever sharing any of the guts of it, I need to copy and paste it. So that's where this is the one that I have saved on my desktop. So I'm actually going to go to the actual, let's see, let me pull up the table of contents because I think that's very useful. Chapter 12 is the electrical safety chapter. Now, just know that there are pieces and parts within it. So I'm going to take you to there. The cool thing about it is it's all hyperlinked. So when you click 12, it will take you to 12. I think I clicked 13. Sorry, y'all. Multitasking. You can see right here, chapter 12, and we have information on inside the home. And so that's where I kind of want you to pick up, Brett, with, there was a lot that we added inside the home, and then we certainly added some things outside. But when you look at this 12.1.9, the testing lab was one of the things you wanted to make sure that we covered, but also about 12.1.12. So if you want to just mention the ones that were new on inside the home, and then we'll go to outside the home.
Sorry about that. So yeah, in terms of inside the home, we've been seeing, because online shopping has become more of a regular thing. I think they said about 20% of shopping is starting to move online, and it's only going to continue to get bigger. So what we've seen over the last, especially decade, but even more recently with COVID, corners are being cut a lot when it comes to things that we take for granted in the United States. So things being certified by UL, CSA, or Intertech, or these other certification labs, we all kind of take it for granted that there's always going to be somebody standing behind the scenes to say if there's a fire, there's somebody that's liable for it. I can tell you firsthand, Washington, D.C., or where I live now in Indianapolis, or any of these other communities I've been to, there are counterfeit electrical products everywhere. They can be things like batteries, more than likely they're extension cords. And these are things that are sold in the off-brand dollar stores. So not your Dollar Trees and typical stuff like that, but they're typically on these off-brand dollar stores. And what we're seeing is you're getting into these vulnerable communities, and it's almost expected that these devices, 50% of them are going to fail. And there's not even speaker wire in a lot of these extension cords that we're seeing. And what's happening is they're causing an instant fire. And if you all have seen any of the stuff that we put out or NFPA's put out, counterfeits are becoming more and more prevalent because people are looking to cut corners, whether that's because of cost or because of availability. Now that we have the supply shortage, a lot of these things are starting to kind of rear their ugly head again. Not to mention, we're going to start to run into problems with drug addicts, unfortunately, breaking into things they shouldn't be breaking into and stealing things like copper. So the world's changing, and I would say you got to keep a mindful eye out and try to educate people on things as the economy changes, what kind of things you should be looking out for. So that's the counterfeit. So not to be all doom and gloom, there's a lot of great things coming on the market too. A lot of people don't understand. So maybe you can take this as a personal kind of tip, but surge protection is a very misunderstood benefit. And if you have whole home surge protection, just to give you some factoids that many people don't know and are surprised about 80% of the home in your home, about 80% of the surges that you see are actually within the home themselves. So for instance, that's an HVAC system kicking on, that's a refrigerator kicking on, any kind of surge in power. And what happens is with our sensitive electronics, if you've noticed around your home how, wow, that washer didn't last as long as the last one, or this refrigerator is kind of crapping out on me a little bit earlier than I remember it. Things used to be made so much better in my time, right? We've all said that as we get older. It's kind of funny how that repeats itself. But I can tell you it's because there's a lot of sensitive electronics in almost anything you look around. Whatever room you're in right now, if you're looking at like in your home office, like a printer, it's got a screen, it's got a motherboard, it's got those kind of things in there. Everything has electricity running through it. Any of those little surges are eventually going to start to degrade that circuitry. And so that's why I have a feeling that you're starting to lose a lot of that stuff. And so whole home surge protection is relatively inexpensive. You can typically get it installed even with the installed price for under $500 to get your whole home done. And that's going to provide much greater protection than your localized surge protection under your computer or for your TV or something. That's typically the only time we ever think about surge protection. So it protects your products, it protects your whole home's products, and then it gives you a little bit of protection in terms of lightning. But typically the electrical manufacturers only market it in places like Tampa Bay and those kind of places where they're very lightning prone. But the bigger issues actually come from your internal circuitry of your own home, things switching on and switching off. So it's just something that we thought was important to add there. It's kind of a quality of life.
How do you get that, Brett? Like so who would do an installation on something like that? Is it
It's an electrician. An electrician would
Okay.
do that. And it's a relatively inexpensive device. So it keeps the installed costs low, but typically you just got to find an electrician. And you all in the fire service, if you can kind of get that message out there, it will do a lot of techies, a lot of good, because they don't realize how much their sensitive electronics are out there, and that's why they're kind of coming offline pretty quickly. And that also goes for, I'll be honest, not to get too deep in this wormhole, it also comes down to your businesses. Everything's about limiting downtime. People do not realize in their businesses with these the supply chain and the sensitive electronics that they have with these motors and stuff that are in their facilities, they don't realize that surge protection can save them a lot of money and a lot of time as well. It's the same thing. The surges are coming from within their business. It's not coming from things like lightning or the utility. It's coming from things within your own building. So it's just something to think about.
Okay. So the next one is arc fault circuit interrupters. They get a bad name sometimes. And yet when you know about the technology, you understand it. And that's something that I think a lot of these folks could benefit from. We added 12.1.17 on arc fault circuit interrupters, what they do. And so I know that's a really long topic, but could you give like a Cliff Note version of what they need to know about that?
Sure. So keep it simple, stupid is what I'm all about. So ground fault is to protect you, the person, the individual, keep you out of the circuit. Arc fault is to basically keep your home and your home safe, to prevent the fire. So AFCIs, unfortunately, as they came onto the market, they weren't foolproof. And there are some harmonic issues. So like, a vacuum cleaner or we even had an issue because we just bought a new home and we're dealing with some AFCIs that keep tripping because of the age of the AFCI that's in the home. So you will have some nuisance tripping depending on how old the home is and how old the breaker is itself. But these devices are pretty much foolproof. They might have some nuisance tripping with harmonics, but they're basically double backing and providing some layer of protection for you that an electrician did the right thing. That he's not putting a screw or a nail through something he shouldn't be putting something through, or a wire hasn't completely failed by something that you or the previous owner did a DIY project, or that you have a rodent in the basement or the attic that chewed through some insulation on a wire and created an arcing fault, which is going to potentially expose you to the insulation that's up in the attic. And so these devices aren't there just to make money for manufacturers. I know that's kind of the electrician's kind of motto, to say this stuff just adds cost to the home. They really are there to keep you safe, and nothing's ever going to be perfect, but I can tell you the manufacturers stand behind this stuff. And if you have issues, they will stand behind the product. And you got to let your electricians know that. You got to let your inspectors know that in your communities, that the manufacturers are there to help. If you've got a problem, speak up and say something.
Well, and I was at a IAEI chapter meeting in Arkansas, and Siemens is one of the manufacturers. And they said, look, when something is deemed defective or a person says, oh, this is messing up, we take back that inventory and we test it. And the failure rate is it was a minuscule, 0.001 or something like minute, that the equipment was actually defective, that it was defective. So something was tripping it, which it's kind of like CO technology. It used to be they had a lot of nuisance alarms and people were like, oh, it's not very reliable. Well, that's not the case anymore. If a CO alarm is going off, you've got a hazard going on in your home. And that's what we tell people. So I think it's similar. The other one is when we talked about outside the home, something you were very adamant about, and you showed us the video for, was ladders, talking about how to carry ladders and giving guidance on that. And also these overhead power lines, just how many people working at their homes get electrocuted from that. So I didn't know if you wanted to mention anything about this outside the home, what we added in for that.
Yeah, it's kind of the same stuff that we repeated for the workplace side of things. It's the same motto: stay away from it. Carry ladders horizontally versus vertically. You just don't think about it until you bump into something, and I'm guilty of that as well. But I can tell you, I moved from Washington D.C. to the Midwest, and power lines coming off of garages is a very common thing. And I'm 6'3". Some of those power lines are maybe 8 feet off the ground. So if you're not careful, you can get tangled up into something relatively quickly, especially when you have large growth trees in some of these older communities, which I'm sure you all get into an awful lot. Everything is not a buried power line in these new communities, and so people just it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, and they're never looking overhead. And that's why that, always look up in all ways is a very important message. And I think people have really responded well to the call 811 before you dig, which is great. But again, they're not necessarily looking for overhead power lines. And then they often say, oh, that's like a telephone line. I can't say how many times I've heard that. And yeah, the more and more stuff we keep putting on those power lines, now there's new, I forget what they're called, something cells where they're putting cell phone towers basically on top of, utility poles. There's just more and more stuff up there that people are curious of what's going on and what they could potentially get involved with. Things like drones. We've seen people fly them into power lines, or the metallic balloons. Those have been an issue as well. And so we got to remember there's always a new generation coming up, right? And we have to do a good job of not only educating about what GFCIs and AFCIs are and the new technologies that come out, but we got to keep repeating the things for the people that have never heard it before, where stay away from electrical substations, right? Don't go breaking into a substation. There's a reason why it's gated off. It's not there just to keep you out. It's there to keep you safe. And power lines in general. I mean, kids just are curious and want to know what's going on. But if they've ever been told it's dangerous and this is why it's dangerous, stay away from those green boxes that are in, your every other home's front yards. Even if you have buried power lines, they're not something to be playing on. And so a lot of those things we just kind of forgot to tell a lot of the next generation. And so we kind of have to remember, we always have to educate that next generation coming up. And it's not every 10 years, it's every like 4 or 5 years.
Absolutely. And, we put in here in that 12.2.8, you were helpful in letting us know that you need to stay at least 35 feet away from a down power line. Putting a threshold on that. If it's wet, it needs to be even further. But we also added in information, and I noticed on your website when you showed it, electric shock drowning. That certainly applies to these pool, hot tubs, and spas, and that's why it's listed here, as well as marinas and boating safety. Docks and how that ties in. But we also added a section on equipment safety. And that was one that you thought would give us a value add. So I just wanted to see if there's anything on that you wanted to add as we kind of round out your session.
Yeah, I mean, electrical shock drowning is definitely kind of it's not necessarily a new phenomenon. And I'm sure many of you know what happens, but a lot of times it gets mistagged as from the coroner about what basically happened. Of course, the person drowned, but what did they drown from? Unless there's not somebody there to kind of witness what happened, many times it's kind of misdiagnosed the cause of death. And so I think it's very important that we're mindful that everybody wants to bring electricity wherever they are. So, I can think of any lake homes that I was at, and people brought out a boom box or even an inner tube pump or something like that. And they're making this temporary power thing, a real live power thing where they're trying to, operate a motorized dock. And what they're doing is they're energizing the water around that dock. And that's, in a marina, that's why they tell you not to swim there, not to get hit by a boat. It's because of the electrical leakage, either from the boat or from the shore or from the power connections. And so it's a very dangerous thing. And most people, especially boat owners, have no clue what dangers are out there. So it's something that the fire service, I think, has to do not to say a better job, but just make people aware of what's out there and what dangers are out there around docks and places that aren't typically powered, like barns and those kind of things. There are some other issues that you got to start thinking about. So just be mindful of it.
Well, we could keep you all afternoon because there's so many topics and we live with so many different devices and things. This is your last chance if you want to enter anything into the questions. I don't have any currently, Brett. We can certainly email you. I did put your email as well as your PIO person's email in the chat so you can access it. But thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday season.
Well, appreciate it, and I hope everybody does as well. And I think, again, let us know as things come up. I realize we're not necessarily front of mind, but we're here to help, and your input is very important to what we do. So let the emails fly. I got to jump to another call, another interview, but we're here to help any way we possibly can. So thanks Kelly.
So
thanks,
much.
everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Brett. All right, y'all, we're just going to take a quick 5-minute stretch break. I know after lunch that you may need just a minute. So just the platform's going to stay on. I did want to tell you that I'm going to go ahead and load up the evaluation is here in the QR code. So if you scan that QR code, you can go to the evaluation, and we really want to hear from you and know what you thought of the summit. Was it useful? We've got one more session this afternoon. And so we're going to take a quick break and then stay tuned as we kind of wrap up the day. So thank you so very much. And we'll talk at 2 o'clock. We'll get back started. So you got 6 minutes to grab a drink and a bathroom break, and we'll talk to you then. All right, we are going to get back started in just a minute. Thank y'all for hanging with us. Hopefully giving you a little bit of an extra break over lunch helps make it a little bit better. I know you'll never replace having this in person, but certainly I learned a lot. I had no idea that the whole home surge protection was something that was legit, that you should actually think about. And so I hope that y'all have taken something away from this. I always feel like if you can be a lifetime learner and take something away, then it's valuable. Everybody take one thing away. So, you know, if you feel like it, please put in the chat whether you think this is valuable or not. And we'll be a good steward of your resources. So I wanted to kind of tell you about some of the emergent issues. As you know, this is our 125th year, our anniversary of NFPA. And we started in 1896. This is a very cool interactive graphic that's online. So you can find it at nfpa.org/125th. Very cool, talks about our history, talks about where we've been, and certainly about the long lineage we have around electrical safety and how to do that. So it is a very neat tool. Go to nfpa.org/125th and you can find out information about it. And then Sparky turned 70. I know this isn't electrical safety, but I have to give a countless plug for the different things that we do. And Sparky the fire dog just turned 70 this year. And as part of that, his website got an upgrade and has a very new look. And one of the things we're going to be doing at the Fire and Life Safety Conference is we will be doing an interactive look at all the different platforms that NFPA has and how to use them. And so I hope that you'll come to our conference. We talk about the ecosystem, and the ecosystem is a vital part of what we all do. So today is certainly around public education. It was around code compliance because we had information about the different codes and standards. It's been about preparedness and emergency response. It's been about the use of codes and reference codes, that investment in safety. Brett talked about the fact that construction sites have a lot of electrocutions, and it's because the skilled workforce issues we're having. How do we make sure we have enough contractors? And then of course, government responsibility. And that is, you know, the public thinks that the government's job is to keep them safe. And y'all know better than anybody that in spite of the fact that your mind may be, here is what we should be doing, we don't always get what we want. But that doesn't mean that we change talking about the things that are really important. So you can find information on the ecosystem online, but we also have this new assessment tool that you can use for your community. So go in, take a look at it. The same thing for this is we always have little quick links to this information. So if you go to nfpa.org/ecosystem, you'll find information about this. And then I always try to tie in some current events. Last week I was in Houston. What crazy timing, y'all, that was. I was actually in Houston and I was with the inspectors and the investigators that were dealing with the incident that happened at Astro World. And there were so many failures in that system. Now, this isn't about pointing fingers. This is about how do we learn from things to be better? And the first question I had is, what is Astro World? And they're like, that was this big amusement park, but basically it was a big old parking lot. This concert was a big old parking lot. No seating, no set seating, but yet it's right across the street from where the football team in Houston plays. And so you can see that there's lots of things that as we kind of dig through all the different pieces and parts of it that apply. One certainly is emergency preparedness and that investment in safety, but also safety in places of public assembly. For all of us, this incident should have reminded you that when you and your family go somewhere, you have a plan that if things go bad. That is, I always tell the story of me and the girls going to the movies. It was on spring break, and I won't ever forget pointing out the exits because I'm nerdy like that and saying to the girls, if something happens, y'all meet me at the car. And I looked at my oldest daughter and said, you need to take Campbell and y'all meet at the car. And the little one said, oh no, mommy, we're not leaving you. And I said, yes, honey, if something goes on, meet me at the car. Because that's how we think. And it may be that you're not able to leave at that moment because you might be helping somebody. So having that forethought to have a plan in place, we're going to learn from this incident a lot, but what are some of the takeaways? There's a blog on NFPA's page, and if you're wanting to read about some of the pieces and components of this and how it ties together, you can look, and these are just some of the cross-cutting things. One, of course, is crowd managers, and that is how does that training tie into this? Having emergency action plans, interoperability between, it came out later that the Houston Fire Department had no contact with the organizers. Houston police certainly had some contact, but within NFPA 3000, the active shooter one, it talks about an incident. And in this case, it was a crush incident, having plans for before, during, and then the mayhem that happens after. That is trying to find people. And we learned from tragedies like the Las Vegas shooting that happened at Mandalay Bay. That spread out into surrounding areas because people fled just trying to get away from it. But all of this ties into the work that we do. And so I just wanted to kind of, tie this to some things we have. I did want to tell you that the American Burning document has been updated. NFPA took fire safety in the US since 1980, and I debated on leaving this in or not, y'all, and I left it in because in there, it talks about key takeaways and what's made some significant changes within fire safety. Certainly one of those pieces and parts was the code adoption of smoke alarms in residential settings. Unfortunately, people still die in homes more than anywhere else. Smoke alarms have made a huge difference in that, but we have a lot of work left to do. And so you can take a picture of this little QR code and it'll take you to the page where it gives you this report. We're also going to do a deeper dive on this and some presentations over the next year. So stay tuned because you'll be hearing more about this. As I said, you got to learn from the past to prepare for the future. And then job tools. I wanted to mention to you as first responders that there's lots of tools on here available to you, especially related to training. People sometimes, I've heard it all, y'all. I've heard NFPA called everything in the world, and yet one of them is no free products anytime. And I would say, I would stand you down any day to say that's not true, because we have a lot of things that are free for you to do. The problem is, we got to get to you. And that's why these summits are so useful. So our free training for first responders, and I'm going to take you there in just a minute because it's perfectly related to electrical safety. We have a brand new public safety drone program. Brett just talked about drones going into power lines and information. We have a drone program that's free for first responders that you can access here. We also have our standards in action for all of you that aren't sure how the standards process works and how that all ties in. It has information on there. And so these are just some of the quick links that are available. And this is a little footprint that you'll find it. When you go to news and research, resources, emergency responders, and then job tools. So that's where you're going to find it. It's kind of like mining sometimes to grab everything off the website. And these are the free trainings. This is just a snippet of them because there's a lot more, but they are around energy storage systems. So we have a emergency solutions one that's available for first responders. We have one on alternative fuel vehicles that's available. We have one on electrical vehicle safety that you can download and use. Take these back to your fire department and use them as training for your firefighters and add it to the fire marshal's offices. And educators, go back and tell your training division about this stuff. We also have an emergency field guide, and this is something people sometimes don't know we have. It talks about how to handle both electric, hybrid, fuel cell, and other fuel trucks, as well as commercial fleets, and how to deal with that in an emergency situation, as well as some of the challenges. You can download that emergency field guide free. And then we also have a confined space NFPA 350 training that's available for you. So you're going to find it at the page we just talked about, emergency responders, job tools, and then you'll see the training. That's the training link. And then NFPA 1700, electrical safety, electronics have changed the fuel loads that we're seeing in homes. And with that, we have got to evolve. And that is, this isn't going to tell you how to do firefighting. And we've heard it in a lot of places, people are saying, well, I know how to fight fire. Well, that's fine. But the realities are we got to learn from the new technology advances and also tactics that are out there. So this is done in partnership with UL. They put together a guide for structural firefighting. It's not a standard, it's just a guide. And as part of that, you can actually look at the information, get free access, and there's a whole tutorial around this. So it's a great tool for you to be looking at from a firefighter safety perspective. And that's what this is about. How do we make sure your firefighters get home and they're safer? And then the Research Foundation. We talk about this a lot of times, and that is technology is advancing so quickly. This is the energy storage site, and I'm going to take you to that. Another one is going to be flammable refrigerants. We are seeing that they are changing because of the carbon footprints that are out there. They're changing the type of things you use for commercial HVAC, regular HVAC, and commercial refrigerators. But as part of that, it is very flammable. And so we want to make sure you're aware of it. So you can see all the different research projects that are underway right now that relate to first responders. A few I wanted to pull out so you would know about is the stranded energy within lithium ion batteries. This is a huge issue. The Surprise, Arizona fire that occurred where we have firefighters that were injured. That one is a big one that we're watching because this is a real hazard that you're going to see. The last couple of presenters have talked about how much PV, how much energy storage systems are coming. And in places like Texas, where they had a catastrophic event where their grid failed, people are like doomsday prepping and saying, what do I do to have energy if things go bad? So you're going to see more and more of this, and we want to make sure you're prepared. We also have, this is the Surprise, Arizona energy storage system that exploded. You can see the door was blown off here. They found one firefighter burned in the desert where he was blown out of where they were. There's a whole case study on this that you can access online. But there's also things like this. This is a whole community microgrid. These are showing up. This is actually in Alabama. I would dare say if Alabama is advancing to this, there's somewhere in North Carolina that's got one. Because we know if those folks have it, that we probably have it somewhere here too. But we're seeing whole communities that have a community scale microgrid in place. And you see it has a power equipment center. It's got batteries, 200,000 alkaline battery equivalent. You can see there's a load bank. You can see there's a natural gas generator. All of this in place. And this is right outside of Birmingham. But we're seeing these pop up. So what does that mean for you? Well, we have an 855 standard. Danny talked about it this morning. This standard you can access for free. All you do is go to nfpa.org/855. You can view it. It talks about designing these systems. It talks about fire protection, fire prevention, the maintenance of them, and decommissioning. And that's the one question we're getting a lot of times is how do we decommission them? What do we do? How do we respond? What is the maintenance on them? All of that is addressed specifically in this 855 standard. So I urge you to please take a look at it. And as you're kind of working through this in your community, that is going to be a great guidebook for you to be able to access resources. I am moderating the chat and doing this. And so I will come back to the questions at the end if y'all are okay as we're going through this. And so just keep me honest and I'll try to do that. I know that a few of our folks are on here and maybe they could watch the chat for me and ask them at the end. But yes, I promise we'll come back to this. All right, energy storage. I told you there's free training on this. Quick link, nfpa.org/ESS. When you go there, you'll find the online training. It is completely free. First responders can use this free. You'll find fact sheets, and this whole tab has information on energy storage and solar energy. It also has photovoltaic systems. And so this is a great tool for you. You'll see the footprint right here, news and research, first responders, high risk hazards, and then energy storage. So this is the landing page where you'll find information on energy storage systems. And then I did want to mention to you, there's a couple of new standards in the hopper. I always laugh at this because some people think that NFPA is kind of boring, but we have a great sense of humor. You can see this is a real thing. NFPA 420 is the standard for fire protection of cannabis. And sometimes people Google it and they're like, she's telling a joke. No, I'm serious. We are seeing extraction happening in North Carolina. This is an issue that in places like Florida that have passed expanded marijuana bills, the fire service was not at the table. And it is so important that you are at the table. This is not just an agricultural issue. It's kind of like preaching to the choir. But the realities are, if we don't have the fire service sitting at the table, and Charlie Johnson and I have been talking about this a lot, we got to be on the front end of this because you're the ones that are going to be responding to these incidents when they occur from distilleries and other things that are happening. We also have a fuel gas standard that's getting into place. I am super excited about this because I've told y'all many times I had a gas leak in my house and it freaked me out. And I went looking for an explosive gas detector for my home. Now, I was able to find one, and it is a CO and explosive gas one. But the scary thing is unlike smoke alarms and CO alarms, there is not a standard that applies to fuel gas detection. So that means it's kind of like the fox tending the hen house. That means the manufacturers are the only ones that are coming up with what they think it needs to be in it, and there's no standardization. So now you're going to see that there will be fuel gas detection for residential settings. There will be a standard, there'll be a guidebook for it, and that's forthcoming. There also is a standard, and this is a heated issue around remote inspections. I can tell you that we need your public comment on all these different standards. That is, you have the ability, you do not have to be an FPA member. All you have to do is have an internet connection, and you can actually go and submit a public comment, and they will respond to your comment as part of that standards process, because we need to make sure y'all are weighing in on these things to make the standards good. The idea for remote inspections would be, it would be more stringent and do a better job than if you were there in person. So you can imagine the pressure to make that possible, which means it's not going to be this is a way to half tail it. This is going to be, this is the way you do it properly, and all the steps and sequences to make sure we have a better product than if you were doing it in person. So I can only imagine what that would be like because it's going to have to be pretty darn good to be able to keep you from being the person there seeing it. And then NFPA 1321 is our standard for fire investigation units. That's also a proposed standard that's open for public comment. Many of you are fire marshals, you are fire inspectors, and some of you are fire investigators. And I learned this, and it was so wonderful, by the way, when I went to the IAAI conference at Myrtle Beach. I saw so many of my fire marshals, and you don't know what a good feeling it is when I see my people there, because that's a new group for me. And so I'm learning, and I'm seeing that many of you are involved in that. But we also have what's called the Enforcer Program. And I wanted to bring that up because NFPA will pay 80% of your expenses for you to join a technical committee. All of you that are on here, we have hundreds of technical committees open that need members. And so if you're interested in that, you can go to our website, take a look, and here's the direct link. I figured I'd make it as easy as possible. Take a picture of this. There are hundreds of openings on technical committees for the fire service. And we always say, don't be punking out a process when we have all these openings and openings for the fire service, and yet we don't have people in the seats. We need you in the seats. And that is, we need you to be involved to make sure that this process is transparent, that we have representation. And so please think about getting involved. We pay 80% of your expenses for you to get involved, and we need you. Some educational materials around electrical safety. I wanted to tell you that Safety Smart Science is in conjunction with Bill Nye, the Science Guy, and he has a great little video on renewable energy. I'm not going to show it to you, but you can find it on SchoolTube. So if you're looking for some cool videos to include electrical safety in your outreach, go ahead and just Google Safety Smart Science with Bill Nye, and you'll be able to find videos to use with your electrical safety campaign. We also have what's called a community toolkit. And our community toolkit, if you are like, I'm not sure how to do all this, well, this gives you step-by-step how to set up a whole electrical safety campaign. And think about it, May is Electrical Safety Month, but Brett just told you the holiday season is one of the peak times for electrical fires. And we've had some fire fatalities that have occurred because of the use of these little lightweight extension cords, connecting things long term. also connecting Christmas lights. And the running joke with me and all the fire marshals is I was one time, I know you cannot believe this, I was one time at a bar. I was asked to go look and do a site visit of a bar. And I walk in and there are Christmas lights that were stapled to the trim. Now, I did not stay because y'all know I'm a little bit of a fruitcake about that, because I was like, this is going to be some crap if I'm standing here and this place goes up. But I could not believe that in a business that you would have, and y'all know exactly where I'm talking about for some of y'all that have been to this one spot on the coast, if I had to say this, that they would have something like that. I could see the catastrophe getting ready to happen. It was so crazy. I could not believe it, that all the stuff we talk about was actually being done. But you'll see that we have electrical safety infographics. We have the toolkit that gives you outreach ideas, all the checklists and things you can download, but all of this is available online if you go to public education and then you go to community toolkits. And then holiday safety. We also have a lot of holiday safety information. All of this will be rolling out in the next few weeks. We're trying to get through Thanksgiving, which we have a huge cooking safety campaign that goes on. Our release went out last week. You can grab it and use it. And I did just want to say, while I had you here for a minute, I am super excited that now you can fry your turkey safely, because NFPA's EMAC says you can use an air fryer, an infrared fryer, a Fry Daddy, anything from a listed device, instead of using the traditional flame and oil. So it's super exciting. We actually use the infrared fryer at our house, all free. The Safe Kids the other day, I was telling them that, and they're like, oh, it's heart healthy and fire safe. An infrared fryer is a great way to actually have a fried turkey. It tastes the exact same, but not have to have oil and a flame. So just something to think about. Download the tip sheets, download the Christmas tree safety one. Some of you have been doing campaigns with your Christmas tree lots. You can download these Christmas tree tags. You can also use these gift tags, but it's a great way for all of us to have some holiday safety along with the people that we influence. And then our social media cards, they're all available. You can see they focus on lots of different topics. The fact that you can gift smoke alarms and CO alarms, think about that, the fact that you can give them, and also about holiday decorating. And then we put the K in Thanksgiving. I was like, is anybody going to catch that? It's kids in Thanksgiving. So here's some kids activities that you can download. You'll find these at sparky.org. There's conversation starters. You know, for a lot of people, this is the first time you've been together with your family since COVID. And so this is a great way to get to know each other and also to be able to give them a little bit of safety information. We have a little Mad Lib that's available around Thanksgiving. And then we have some little coloring sheets that are available too. So you can see, you can use our Thanksgiving and our Christmas things to keep it fire safe, and use these and share across your platforms. You can access them at sparky.org. And then infographics. I always want to mention that the U.S. Fire Administration is a super user of the EMAC. Their electrical safety resources are out of this world. They have some great infographics. You saw that the Electrical Safety Foundation International has a ton of infographics, but this is one of my favorite things. These are the social media cards. Here's one, and you can see November, December, January, and February. That's when we have our peak of electrical fire deaths. We know that the majority of these electrical fires happen from midnight to 8 a.m. A lot of them involve home electrical wiring. And then we talk about making sure, especially with space heaters and these cool evenings we've had, that you plug things directly into the wall outlet. Put in some outlets if you're having to use extension cords, because they are not for long-term use. And then making sure that you plug only one appliance directly into a wall outlet at a time if they carry a heavy load on them. And so those are all great tips that you can use and download. And you just go to U.S. Fire Administration, click on safety information, and you'll find it. So you can see these are some additional ones that they have. These are the actual social media cards, and they are interactive. And I only just grabbed a snippet of them, but I would tell you that clothes dryers are still a huge issue. People don't realize that lint can build up and cause issues. So making sure that you grab all these electrical safety materials at the U.S. Fire Administration and think about including that with your holiday campaign. And then pictographs. We get a lot of questions on, I need translations. And I want to tell you that the days of translating everything are over. And that is because there are so many dialects in every single language that it's really hard to get it right. And we're finding that out, that we have an English version of something. And so I have a dear friend that's Vietnamese, and he was telling me, I said, I'm gonna learn Vietnamese one day. And he said, you'll never learn my dialect because it's not in any of the translators. I said, well, one day I'm gonna be speaking Southern Vietnamese when I come in here, because I want to learn it, because I love him and his family. And I thought it'd be really cool to learn their language, but he's like, the dialects are all different. And that is why at NFPA, we have moved to using pictographs with the U.S. Fire Administration. So where did this come from? Well, the airlines have been doing it for years. That is, when you board a plane and they put out the emergency paperwork, and hopefully y'all are the people that actually pull out the evacuation plan for your airplane. The exit could be in front of you, beside you, or behind you. And I hope that y'all are the people that actually pay attention when the flight attendants are talking through the safety features of the airplane. And they are using pictographs. They just use pictures. There's no words in the evacuation plan. Well, it's the same thing with pictographs. And they have electrical and appliances that are in pictographs that you can use to tell the story. So think about incorporating pictographs with all different audiences, whether it's senior adults, whether it's immigrant populations, but do not get caught up in having to do translations. Use these materials directly. This is a direct link on how to download them. And there's actually a little video that talks you through how to use pictographs and the science and behind it, why this works. So it's a great way to include electrical safety in your campaign. I wanted to also mention about outdoor patio heaters. There are lots of ways that these electric patio heaters are going to continue to be used. There are propane ones, and that has a whole safety feature that goes along with it. But there are also electric patio heaters. So you can download this fact sheet online. If you go to nfpa.org and in the search bar, put outdoor patio heaters, you'll be able to download the fact sheet that details about them and some of the challenges of these electric heaters, the installation requirements, etc. And then we are finishing up with Learn the Sounds of Fire Safety. Now, Fire Prevention Week used to be a one-week thing. Now we see it as the kickoff for the remainder of the year. So we hope that in the coming months, you're going to continue to talk to people about smoke alarms and CO alarms. As people crank up their heat, CO becomes an additional hazard that we need to be working on year round. There hasn't been near enough emphasis on this. So if you didn't know, all of the information is available at firepreventionweek.org, or this is the quick link for it for FPW. That site will remain up, and lots of those materials do not have dates on them, so you can use them long past Fire Prevention Week. And we hope, because the banners this year were without a date, we hope as you're doing education around learning the sounds of fire safety, that you'll take that banner out throughout the year and use it. And we were so fortunate that State Farm donated so many kits here in North Carolina, both Sparky Educator kits and Fire Prevention Week kits to communities. And so I would be interested to see, for the people that are on here, if you've got a Fire Prevention Week kit, if you wouldn't mind putting it in the chat so that Kim Conyers and State Farm can get a big thank you for donating those Fire Prevention Week kits this year. All right, and also this is the Sparky Educator kit. You'll see that this is the stuffy, this is the large reader book, and then this is the small book. And these are great tools, and we have this lesson plan that you can download online at Sparky Schoolhouse as well. But people ask for a long time about Sparky Educators, and we have some of those. Thank y'all for putting that in the chat, y'all, so Kim can see y'all thanking her for the Sparky kits and also the Fire Prevention Week kits. But this is a great way for you to use the Sparky, the Fire Dog story. You can use it in a couple of ways. You can certainly use the physical copy of it, but you can also go to sparky.org and click on Sparky, and there's an e-reader book that you can do it virtually. You can also, there on our YouTube channel and on Sparky, you'll see the video of a teacher reading it. And so there's lots of ways for you to use the story of Sparky as you're out there. And we're doing a community helper day at my daughter's school. And as part of it, we're going to take this reader out. And I thought, well, are they too old to read to them? Do you know that kids up to 6th grade love to be read to? Now, they might not admit it. And that's the key, is a lot of times they may say, oh no, but their teachers told me, because I was not going to include them. Their teachers were like, please include them. Like, they love that. So just one more tool for you to use. And then hopefully you know about Craig 1300. Craig 1300 is our community risk assessment that's based off of NFPA 1300. We had several pilots here in North Carolina, and several of the people on this webinar participated in the pilot. And what it did is it helps you compile all the different pieces and parts of the risk in your communities, and it pulls that data together. We had 250 pilot sites. And then before that, we had an additional 50 that participated in this My Sidewalk program. And so if you want to find out more about community risk assessments to see if electrical safety is one of those hazards that you have, you can certainly download at nfpa.org/Craig1300 to get more information about that program. And then learn something new. I want to encourage y'all to participate in a couple of different platforms with NFPA. Don't have to be a member, don't have to buy anything. All you have to have is an internet connection. So one is, we have a YouTube channel. The NFPA YouTube channel is called Learn Something New. And on there, we talk about all different current events and things that have happened. So one is on electrical shock grounded. If you want to know more about that, what you can do about it and other electrical issues, you can go to Learn Something New. You can subscribe to it. And we also have NFPA Kids. So NFPA Kids is a kid-friendly site that you can use to get information. Then we have the NFPA Journal. Now, this is one of my favorite things. If you're a member of NFPA, you get a printed copy mailed to you quarterly. If you are not a member of NFPA, you can view it online. And it's actually in a book reader format. So now you can actually read it like a real magazine on the screen. But it is pretty cool that you can access the journal contents online, and it talks about all kinds of stuff that you interface with in the fire service. So go in there, take a look at the NFPA Journal, and then our NFPA podcasts. They're free. They're on every one of the different platforms that are available, and they're constantly adding content on this. And I've started listening to the podcast series just to hear about current events and things that are going on, but it's a great way to stay engaged. You can go to our website and download it, or you can do that directly through Spotify or any of the audiobook platforms that you have. And this is just a sampling of some of the different programs that are up on there. I haven't updated this in a little while because the lasting impact of 9/11 talked about communications. It was a great one that had some of the national leaders that are looking at how have we gotten better in the 20 years since 9/11. And so you'll see information on lots and lots of different programs, and all of those are free online. And then this is the journal. This is what it looks like in page view. You'll see all the emergent issues that are on here. You'll see ecosystem failures and successes that are in here. And then I did want to talk to you about NFPA Link, because we are actually doing a demo with the Fire Marshal Association, and Chief Smart's on here. And I think I owe you a link. And so I literally owe you a link to be able to show this. But we're going to do a real-time walkthrough of what Link is. But I did want to give you just a quick overview of what this is. So many of you know the Fire Code subscription service right here. You probably have one of these in your department that you access PDFs of the old codes. But we have a new program called NFPA Link. And this is the login information for you to take a look at it. And what it is it's an online platform that's a subscription based for you to be able to access the codes and standards. So if you take a picture of this QR code, it'll take you to the page. If you don't do anything else, do the free 14-day trial. It doesn't obligate you to anything. Justin just mentioned, I did a demo with them last week in Asheville Fire Department as well, and Fuquay Fire Department last week. We're doing the fire marshals. Actually, Ted from the Mecklenburg County Fire Marshal's office is on here, but they wanted to know and do a deeper dive. So actually, Chief Smart and the fire marshals are setting up an in-depth demo that we're going to do. So Chief Smart, if it's okay if they contact you to get added to that list, would you mind putting your email in the chat? And you contact Chief Smart if you want to do a more in-depth real-time walkthrough on this. We no longer have PDFs. of things that you can download, new versions. So one of the ones is 921 that a lot of people use. And they found within the Fire Code subscription service that it didn't have the ability to download the PDF. So let me tell you why that is. Well, people are really creative. That's why. And people were taking the PDFs and they were modifying it, and then they were sending it out. And so that is a liability for your department. And it's also a liability for NFPA because they were changing words in it. They were changing excerpts, and it was a liability. So we have a new platform that you can use. So what does it include? Well, you can download from it. You can use it offline. And that's why you're not hearing about it till now, because we had to get that capacity in place before we rolled it out to the fire service. So this is what it looks like when you get in there. It's a book view, and you can pick your favorites. You can have tutorials right here. And then as you go through it, you can pick the different versions of it. So for NFPA 72 or 70 or 1 or 101, you're going to see several back issues of it that are listed, at least 3 of them. Now, if you go in there and you do a free trial and the version that you use is not in there, you can always view it free online. And so if you need to just visit it, you can look at it. And so this is how it looks when you go through and you actually take a look at it. And then each chapter is hyperlinked. So you can click on it. It's going to take you to the actual page. And this is what it looks like. It's going to look very similar to your code book. So this shows a change that occurred and it's highlighted. If there's places that it references another standard, it's going to link to it. And the way this works is you actually set up, and our enhanced content is all in here. So today we've been talking about the NEC. Now, some of you may not use that, but some of you may. But your building folks may actually use it. And so your building department may use it. So I encourage you to be the Switzerland of the group, and you may actually want to go and sing Kumbaya and get together and talk to them about it, because this has so much more functionality that you may decide as a town or a county to go in together and to set up a team within Link. And one of the questions that came up is, can an organization change their subscription to Link versus the online code? Yes. If you already renewed your Fire Code subscription service, we do have the ability for you to convert to Link. Now, I'll tell you that I'm going to show you the pricing. I'm not in sales, so I'm just giving you this because a lot of y'all use this stuff and it's a really good program. But here's the reality. You paid $1,500 for one Fire Code subscription service, and yet you can buy 15 subscriptions and all of y'all have access for the same price, because it's about $100 a year. And so everything will be loaded by the middle of 2022. Now that's like the way back versions, because everything current is in there and several back versions. But you can always access the other. It's just those older versions of codes that they have to move into this platform. So the drop dead date that everything will be in there is the end of 2022. But all of the versions that any of you will be using would be in there by the middle of the year. Now, go in there, though, and take a look and see if there's versions that you use, because you may be surprised at how many are already in there. You can also do a search feature, and this is what I love, is you can actually search by a code or standard. You can put a keyword in, and it's going to pull up everywhere within that code or that chapter, if you want to get down to the bones of it, that you can do it. And so it's a really great way to save time and energy and to go through and learn it. And then here's the pricing. I told you I'm not in sales, so don't feel any pressure. Pretty much teams are, you have a single user. This is that freebie. You just do a 2-week trial, try it out. You don't have anything to lose. If an individual were to do it, you can see it's $9.99 a month. It goes down to $8.33 a month if you auto renew it. And then we have teams, and that is users up to 5 and users up to 10, and the pricing goes down from there. And then if you have 11 or more people that you want to be part of your team, you can actually request a quote. But I'll tell you that for the fire service, between 11 and 30 users is roughly $91 a year. That's what it comes out to be for you to access Link. So you can see that's a much more economical way of accessing all the codes and standards. And so a lot of you on here have probably been using Link and have seen the value. The other thing that you're able to do is cut and paste from it. So if there's a business that's like, well, tell me why I have to do that, you can send it directly from the Link platform and it'll send them the excerpt in the code, and you can put a note, you can bookmark things. But if you want to be part of a demo of this and learn more about it, Chief Smart put his email in there. If you send him an email, then we'll include you in the in-depth demo we're going to do in real time in the next week. Is it this Friday? Okay. Yes. Okay. This Friday, we're going to be doing a Link walkthrough with the fire marshals. But it's a great tool for you, and hopefully you'll access it. This is the map. I will tell you that I fought hard to be able to keep North Carolina, because there was no way they were going to not give me my home state when we went through our reorg. But I have North Carolina, and then I split over and I picked up Texas and Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And they got some nice folks down there. But you can see we do occasionally have people from other states as part of this. But I also wanted to make sure that I gave you my contact information. I'm a resource to you, and I can tell you that customer service is a big part of what I do. And that is, this is my cell number. This is my email. And I am out traveling. We're back on the road, and it's been a little busy here lately. So text me, send me an email. I promise I will get back to you. If you don't hear back from me, then I must not have gotten it, because I can promise you that I am very committed to making sure that I provide good customer service. And y'all are my peeps. So, you know, there's not going to be much time between what I'm doing and missing out on working with y'all. So with that, I'm going to go back and check the questions. Now, I am going to do a couple of housekeeping things as we kind of close out today. And that is, please sign in. This is the forms link to sign in to get credit for the afternoon. Also, if you have trouble with accessing this Google form, please send me an email. I'm going to put my email in here and let me know what you participated in, and we'll add you to the training one. Also, if you did this from a central office where a bunch of y'all were there instead of just one user, if you'll let me know, we can give you credit for the people that participated. You just need to indicate when they were there and how long they were there. And then I also am going to pull up the, let me pull up the slide that has the evaluation, because we really need to hear feedback from you on if this was useful. And I just hope that today has been something that you were able to learn something from, and it was worthwhile for you to take a day away and to be doing your normal job and be on here. I did want to also just give you a minute. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to try to page back up. We answered the question on converting your fire code subscription to Link. Yes, and we have a person that can help you with that. Thank you to Morrisville's Fire Marshal's Office. I know y'all signed up, and I appreciate that. Let's see. We'll follow up on some of those. Justin mentioned about Morrisville. Camp Lejeune was on here. And so I think that is all the questions that we had. If there was another one that I did not answer, if you wouldn't mind putting it in the chat real quick, just so I can answer it before we finish out the afternoon. I hope you learned something today. I hope it was worthwhile, and I appreciate y'all taking time. There will be a recording of this, and that's a question somebody asked. We did record it, and it will be housed on the OSFM site so that you can go in there and grab it. If you miss pieces and parts of it, you'll be able to view it and scan through it. We'll also be sending out training certificates from it. Now, it will take probably till the end of the month for us to get that to you. And we're hoping that our partners will help with that. So stay tuned. As long as you listed yourself in the roster and we can validate your attendance, we'll be sending out those certificates for you. And Stacy mentioned about next year, we are planning for it to be in person. If we had the vision of it, you know, we would have maybe done it, but y'all, when we had to make a decision, we really thought long and hard about it, and we decided it was right to do it this way. Also, there is going to be a sprinkler event in Morrisville. And Justin McLaurin is on here. They're doing a big side-by-side burn. And, you know, we want you to participate in our Fire Sprinkler Coalition. So Justin is doing a burn on December 11th in Marsville. It will be live on Facebook, but they're doing this big event. And he wanted to make sure y'all knew about it. Also, if you're interested in home fire sprinklers, we want you to be able to participate in that. And Charlie Johnson is actually the chair of that group, but we need your participation because we've been doing some builder incentive workshops where we figured out another way to incentivize builders. One is you pad their pockets with more money, but we get what we want, which is home sprinklered, and they make more money because they can have trade-offs that are okay for us. And I mentioned I was in Texas last week, a place called Pearland, and they had a location that you could only do one entrance. And so he said, well, you know, you can actually do this if you sprinkler the houses. And you know, the builder said, oh, absolutely. And it's like, darn it, why in the world can that work in some places? And then other times they fight us tooth and nail. Now they've had like 3 or 4 other subdivisions that have willingly gone in and sprinklered homes because it was no big deal. And so we're trying to figure out how we can move the needle in North Carolina. Charlie tells me that there are subdivisions that are being sprinklered. We don't hear a lot about it, but there is hope. And so the good thing is we may not be able to legislate it here, but there's more than one way to attract flies, right? With honey, or, you know, the other way. And we're going to have to sweeten the deal. And so that's why we're coming up with these builder incentives. And it's another way, since they shut us down legislatively, that we can get houses sprinklered. So I hope one day I'm going to be able to tell y'all my house is sprinklered, because it is such a pain in the old kahuna that we cannot get it sprinklered without it costing a quarter of what my whole house is worth. It's ridiculous. So with that, happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, or any other observance that you partake in. I appreciate y'all so much. I hope that your families will be healthy and safe. And thank you so much for being part of this, and enjoy the 14 minutes of your life we gave you back. So thank y'all so much. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you soon. Chief Smart, I got to see you the whole time underneath my picture up here, and I was like, oh, he was so nice. I could see his friendly face down there. It was so nice. I'm gonna ask you to unmute. Hey, Jamie.
Hey, Kelly.
Yes, sir.
Would you send me that link again? I'm sure you probably did for this coming Friday.
No, and that's what made me say I've got it on my calendar. I have literally been living one day at a time.
I know it's
trying
okay.
to get through. So thank you for not being mad at me.
No, not at all, girl. You are perfect. Here's the thing. Just full disclosure. I'm on EMS that day.
Okay.
We've had a staffing issue, so I'm having to cover in. But I'm hoping and crossing my fingers I won't have a call during our time.
Okay. Well, either way, once we have the Zoom set up, and I think we decided to do it on Zoom because it was easier, just like this. So I'm going to send you that right now. So can you confirm the time that you wanted?
We had said 10 o'clock.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I'm just making sure, because
Yes,
I'm going to set it up as soon as we get out of this one, and we'll have that link sent to you. The good thing is that once we have it set up and you send it out to your group, if you have to step off, you won't kick anything out of it. It'll be able to go right on.
Okay.
And then if your department needs to switch, I have a contact at NFPA that we'll put you in touch with, and she can help. They pretty much credit you back unless you buy the same amount. They credit you back.
Sure. Well, we're probably going to go with the one that's the most broad as far as the number of folks. So it may be a wash, but by the same token, it looks like it's a much more reasonable platform, maybe more so. I mean, even though we're used to the other one, it's still, that one looks mighty attractive as far as how they've polished it up and made it look a lot better.
Oh, I can tell you, it's night and day. Like once we get in there and you peruse around it, She's Smart. It is so different than what the other one was that it's not even. Okay. We're not even in the same ballpark. So
well,
no worries.
Just thank you for being you. just taking care of business like you do. Your husband, your family, you're just cat's meow, girl. Trust me.
Well, you and I go back a long time. I tell you, I always second guess myself. Like, are these events useful and should we do them? And then I learned something and I'm like, I see people like Jeff Johnson and you and Jeannie's on here. A lot of our fire marshals, Lynn Needham was on here, and it just makes me so proud that I have the opportunity. And hopefully Tommy Batson was at the ball game when I was out there the other day. And,
Yep.
you know, I could name all of y'all, you know, and
Well,
what
it's
you've
just,
done.
here's the thing. We're passing on to others.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be one day when we're not going to be doing this. And it's
Yeah.
okay. That's the circle